If state necessity compels, if I were to commit a mean act, I would certainly commit it. But then I will definitely find a scapegoat, onto whom I will pompously place the blame for what happened. This way, I will solve two problems at once. I'll get rid of someone under a plausible pretext of the most incompetent subordinates, and I will fulfill the task required by the state. Dark Lord's rule number 3. After a memorable game of chess with the commander, I waited for him to appear on the threshold of my cabin for several days, either alone or accompanied by a detachment of guards for greater fun. However, to my surprise, no one addressed me either at home or simply somewhere on the station. It seemed that Sinclair took a break to think about what had happened and my part in it. Although, on the other hand, he had just been kidnapped and interrogated with the use of a crude and clearly illegal device for reading thoughts. He could well consider my appearance as part of the induced reality into which his consciousness was immersed. In any case, time will tell my participation was clearly noticed, and since I had positioned myself all this time only from the positive side of the good neighbor, the attitude towards me should be appropriate. The phrase casually dropped by Sinclair, "You are the first ambassador who is also, a telepath," made me think. It turns out interesting. The station command clearly does not know that the ambassador of the Vorlon Empire, as well as all other representatives of his race, are not only telepaths, but are also capable of walking into the consciousness of everyone around them, as if they were their own home. Although, on the other hand, the Psi Corps should definitely be aware of such a feature, unless Kosh closes tightly when wearers of the badge and gloves appear, which means, sooner or later, a visit from this fraternity will follow. They certainly don't suffer from excessive shyness when it comes to their work sphere. As far as I remembered Bester's psychological profile, this guy wouldn't even look at the ambassador's status if he suddenly decided to check his suspicions. So, it wasn't for nothing that I took care of setting up my personal genetics laboratory. It was very much for nothing. Alas. But, as seemed to be becoming a tradition, I was interrupted in the middle of my thoughts by a signal from the front door. Somewhat to my surprise, Ambassador Delenn was in the hallway, suddenly honoring me with her visit. Curious. "Good evening, Madam Ambassador." I opened the door with a welcoming smile. "Is there anything I can help you with?" "Lord Baal, I hope I'm not disturbing you?" "Not at all. Please come in, I beg you." Letting the Minbar woman into the cabin, I watch as she looks around the ostentatiously rich furnishings of the room with poorly concealed curiosity, and perhaps some surprised disapproval. Having seated the guest on the sofa, I myself settle down opposite her, in the armchair, expectantly looking at the woman. I was hoping to clarify the recent events that have shaken the station. "Oh, I suppose you mean the kidnapping and subsequent rescue of Commander Sinclair?" "Yes," Delenn nodded solemnly. "That's exactly it." "I'll try to dispel your curiosity," I spread my hands. "But honestly, Madam Ambassador, I don't think I know much more than you. Not a word of a lie. After all, not much is a flexible concept. I understand. But in a matter like this, the more details, the closer to the truth the general information will be." "A wise approach," I nod. "But I really don't know too much. I just happened to be a witness to this impudent act of the commander's relatives, which I shared with Mr. Garibaldi." Delenn watched me closely as I answered. Nothing special. No one would notice anything out of the ordinary with a normal glance. But with the observation skills of a replicator, I was able to catch that the ambassador was clearly tense and was carefully watching my reaction and looking for a second and third layer in the words I was saying. Interesting. Was there something not so simple with the kidnapping of Sinclair? How inconvenient to remember the canon so poorly. Although, damn it, I should have already done such a thing here with just my appearance that the canon could go far and long. Or not. True. I don't quite understand why you came to me with this question. Oh, nothing special. Having tensed up a little more for a moment, the Minbari woman finally got hold of herself and simply smiled politely. Like you, I was lucky enough to be in the right place. I heard part of the conversation between the commander and Mr. Garibaldi, in which your name flashed. So I thought, curious twice. The ambassador eavesdrops on the conversation between the station commander and the chief of security, and persistently tries to gather additional information. There are too many coincidences in this case. No, I don't believe that Delenn is somehow connected with the abduction. If anything, I remembered that moment of canon very well. The Minbari were shown as unambiguous representatives of the Beaver forces, except... Exactly. They kidnapped Sinclair during the siege of Earth for interrogation, and then they erased his memory when they found out that the humans were ex-Minbari. That's what made her worried. After all, if they were digging around in Sinclair's head, who knows what they could have found. Besides, Delenn continued after a short pause, your appearance on the station has greatly agitated the public, and I believe I will not be mistaken if I assume that it was not only my government that considered it worth establishing at least minimally friendly relations with the Goa Old Empire. If we consider the performance arranged by the Drazi and the celebration of Ambassador Malari as the establishment of friendship, I nod. Then I believe you are right. Yes, alas, the woman smiled sadly. Londo is incorrigible, and the Drazi bully everyone they can. There are few more warlike civilizations currently active in the known part of the galaxy. An interesting formulation. I hope these two frankly negative examples will not affect your opinion of the other members of the Council. Not at all, Madam Ambassador. I never judge all members of society based on a few, not even a majority. Besides, Commander Sinclair was already worried about the same thing, and I believe we have resolved that little misunderstanding. With what? If it's not a secret? Oh, nothing secret. I simply informed the commander that our empire does not seek conflict with anyone. I smile in response. That certainly brings some relief, Lord Baal. The Minbari nodded thoughtfully. But what if the conflict itself comes to you? I stroke my beard, looking thoughtfully at Delenn. Madam Ambassador, if someone shows aggression against our empire, I mean real aggression, and not that circus act that the Drazi pulled off, of course, we will take adequate countermeasures. But this is definitely an extreme case. So, you want to say? I want to say, I feign a tired sigh, that we will not interfere in local territorial squabbles, as long as it does not directly concern us. Believe me, there is little pleasure in unleashing an interstellar war of extermination. In any galaxy, there are much more interesting and worthwhile things to spend your life on. I understand your point of view. Minbari gave a long half bow, rising to her feet. Thank you for the pleasant conversation and satisfying my curiosity. I'll always be glad to see you, I stand up in response. It's nice to communicate with a representative of such a deeply developed race as yours. I'd also like to drag Ambassador Kosh out for a chat. I allow myself a slight smile, but he's incredibly silent. Delenn allowed herself a brief smile to show that the joke was accepted, and bowing once more, left the cabin, leaving me thoughtful. Curious. No, this conversation cannot be considered some kind of recruitment attempt or something. But she was definitely trying to find out something much more than what was voiced in her questions and my answers to them. But was it a successful question? Well, if the Minbari ambassador is followed by the others, it can be admitted that they have definitely stirred. They have been swinging for a while, perhaps. For some time after the Minbari ambassador left, I sat in thought, also assessing the conversation that had just taken place. From the top of my, albeit small, but knowledge of the canon, it turned out that Delenn was trying to find out from afar my possible attitude to the upcoming return of the shadows and the planned mess in the galaxy. I suppose that when all the ugliness begins, she, Sheridan, and Kosh may well come to me again, broadcast a heart-rending story about the struggle of the forces of light against evil. However, this seemed to be a completely expected outcome. The more I appeared in the eyes of the witnesses as a completely trustworthy and kind subject. Well, I think I can give them a few more examples for reflection. There is still plenty of time. I nod to my thoughts, and the younger ones in one of my systems receive a command, starting to implement the idea that recently came to my mind. Interlude. Around the dim and cold ball of Shlekta, a Minbari colony that actually belonged to the warrior caste, a defense station floated leisurely, carefully feeling the surrounding space with all its sensors. Not that it was absolutely necessary, but the representatives of the militant part of this people believed that it was better to be prepared for the worst than to be complacent in the face of the unexpected. The last war, which had begun due to the completely unexpected misunderstanding of their traditions by Earthships, had only strengthened their confidence in their rightness. 4 Charlene-class cruisers served the same purpose, one of which patrolled space near the transition zone, and 3 of which flew around the planet's outskirts, trying to cover as much of the territory under their control as possible. On the far edge of the system, almost lost against the background of stars, a tiny funnel of a hyperspace transition flashed and immediately disappeared. The cruisers that jerked in that direction, having managed to catch the disturbance of space at the very edge of sensor sensitivity, ironed space for almost half an hour in search of an unknown intruder, but were unable to detect anything in any of the spectra available for observation. Small gravitational anomalies, periodically detected by the more powerful sensors of the orbital station, aroused suspicion, but the personnel believed that these were the consequences of long flights of the ships, especially since they used gravity engines. And 2 minutes later, a short, fiery streak flashed in the atmosphere of Shelekta, falling somewhere in the region of the equator, practically in the middle of the largest continent, incredibly luckily landing right in one of the large lakes. Shealith, we've checked everything. A younger assistant approached the gloomy Minbari, who was sitting in a chair on the bridge of one of the patrol ships, bowing his head. Not a single trace of the intruder. What did you manage to detect? The transition funnel was open for 3 seconds, during which time no ship known to us could have passed through it, especially considering its size. Even we cannot install a hyperdrive on such a small vessel. I don't like all this. Shealith, who was also the captain of the ship, frowned even more. His subordinates found no trace of an outsider either in the system or on the planet's nearest satellites. The sensors showed only minor gravitational anomalies, which usually accompanied large cruisers anyway. But it was precisely this, the fact that everything looked absolutely normal, that did not give Saran of the Windblades clan any peace. His intuition simply demanded that some measures be taken. Comb the system again, paying special attention to the coordinates of the crater's detection. And then, he thought for a moment, let one of the ships pass over the planet. But why? To make sure that the unknown guest didn't fool us all? Yes, sir. She'alit. A serene snow-covered desert filled with howling wind and snow dust. Striking the eye, even the cool-loving Minbari did not settle in this part of the continent, preferring a windswept plain with several lakes to a quieter area near the mountain range. There the colony buildings were erected, partly going deep into the rock, but mostly pleasing the eye with the typical architecture of this race. With a crunch, almost immediately muffled by gusts of wind, the ice shell split, and something like a metal spider crawled out of one of the lakes onto dry land, busily scraping its limbs, and immediately headed unerringly towards the nearest city. 2 seconds later, another spider followed, and another, and another. She'alit! We've discovered something strange on the planet. Mechanisms! Similar to... The Minbari hesitated, remembering the name. Earth spiders, only 100 times larger. What? The captain quickly approached the viewing area, peering intently at the image. How many are there? Hundreds. But that's not the worst. Their numbers are growing. They're absorbing all the matter they come across and increasing their numbers. They seem to feed only on metal-containing materials, but they're still increasing their numbers very quickly. Where are they heading? In the name of Valen. They are going to Korone. How much longer is it to the city? Half an hour maximum. Running his palm over the crystals of the panel, Elite brought up the supposed route of the targets for review. Most likely they all clearly converged on the central building of the settlement. It seems that they are attracted by the energy source. Who are they? Get us into attack range. Tell Saran we're entering combat. But we won't be able to enter the atmosphere, and from such a distance I'm afraid the effect of the attack will be small. Then send the flyers, the Minbari replied irritably. It will be done. The cruiser Stravi took up position in the lowest orbit possible, following the silver stream. Almost immediately, 10 Neal fighters took off from their hangars, heading for the planet. Technically, they were also ill-suited for combat in the atmosphere, but they were much more likely to survive the flight than the large but completely aerodynamic Charlene cruisers. They won't be able to develop high speed in the atmosphere. So while they're approaching the target, aim the main caliber and fire a salvo into the middle of into the middle of the enemy stream. Elite turned silently to the control panel, his hands flickering over the crystals, and the next moment, from somewhere out of his field of vision, a bright beam of energy crossed the overview screen, cutting a strip right across the crowd of spiders. What? It's impossible. The captain practically jumped out of his chair, staring at what was happening with disbelief. Thanks to the capabilities of the tactical system, he was able to see in detail how in the first second the beam, as expected, literally evaporated a bunch of creatures at the point of impact, also leaving a deep crater in the ground with melted edges. Then, as it moved further, with each subsequent target the effect became weaker and weaker. In the end, another spider just sank slightly on its paws, frozen for a few seconds. But then it got up, and again, moved after the crowd of its fellows as if nothing had happened. Another salvo, another flash of energy. This time only the first group of spiders sank to the ground, never to rise again. The rest, causing the captain to look extremely surprised, almost immediately moved out of his way. And when the shot ended, they even began to bustle about, gathering into a common structure. Very soon, only one spider-like figure continued on its way, almost completely repeating its younger brothers, only much larger. Fighters, take an attack course. After leaving the line of fire, we will give another salvo. The captain of the Stravi stubbornly refused to accept the idea that someone's creation could survive a salvo of the main caliber of the Charlene, and simply move on. The flight of fighters, barely able to withstand the flight in atmospheric conditions, still approached the target, but a full salvo of neutron weapons had no effect on the spiders. They apparently did not even notice it. Focused salvo. Satisfied that the Niles were out of the line of fire, rising again into the upper atmosphere, Shealith gave the command to fire. The Stravi trembled slightly under the Minbari's feet, erupting a brightly shining beam of energy down onto the planet, striking the exact center of the silver stream below, exactly like the newly assembled giant spider. Come on, come on. In the first moments, it seemed to the ship's crew that even such an attack would have no effect, but when Elite was ready to turn off the weapon to avoid damage due to overheating from prolonged shooting, the huge spider on the planet shuddered with its entire body, enveloped in a cloud of electrical discharges visible even from orbit, and sank to the ground. Praise be to Valen. The captain's assistant exhaled. Incredible. I wouldn't like to meet his owners. The main thing is that the city is now out of danger, and the Grey Council will take care of the rest. Let them have a headache like... Shealit, look. Turning his gaze back to the view screen, the captain couldn't help but utter a tricky curse. The huge spider carcass was literally falling apart before his eyes, and with strong magnification it became clear that it was falling apart into the same small spiders that it consisted of. But something else was worse. This entire mass was now busily burrowing into the frozen ground, leaving only a hole in the ground in its place. Damn it! Fire another volley! We can't. Shealit, if we fire, we risk losing the weapon, and I'm afraid it won't reach them. If a direct hit didn't destroy them, then it certainly won't be possible through a layer of rock. The captain could only clench his fists in impotent rage, watching on the screen as the swarm of spiders, judging by the sensor readings, continued moving in the same direction. We are retreating. They are not yielding to our weapons. They are simply ignoring them. You must report to Minbar. Our communication systems are being jammed. Shealith Stravi watched tensely as the transmission from the planet's surface miraculously broke through the cloud of interference that appeared as soon as the enemy reached the city. From orbit, it was visible how hordes of spider-like creatures literally overwhelmed the central building of the settlement, disappearing inside within seconds. And then the nightmare began. Communication was lost. The ship's sensors detected a sharp jump in power in the reactor installed there, and a few minutes later this message arrived. The city was completely lost. They don't attack, almost completely ignore living opponents. They only disable all equipment, and, in the name of Valen, they devour it. Now the local connection with the city has disappeared. It seems the spiders have reached this transmitter too. Send a message to Minbar immediately. I'm afraid, the captain sighed heavily, we can't handle this ourselves. But it's almost 5 days' journey to Minbar. They won't have time. And so that they have time, we are here. After contacting the metropolis, transmit to the remaining ships so that they arrive at the planet. Our weapons cannot harm them, but they can slow them down. Elite nodded briefly and ran to the comm panel, calling the command on the capital planet, and the captain of the cruiser watched with intense attention what was happening below, trying to see at least one opportunity for victory over the superior, at least technologically, enemy. The only thing that brought any relief was the fact that the enemy, for some unknown reason, had not yet attacked the city's inhabitants. The mechanisms were seizing buildings, busily dismantling them into structural elements, connecting to energy highways and computers, but completely ignoring the Minbari. Even when they were fired upon, the most they responded with was an energy discharge unknown to the Minbari, which temporarily disabled their consciousness. Shayalit, sensors are recording a sharp increase in energy production in the city's energy node. Power has increased almost 7-fold. What? But how is that possible? The reactor should have exploded long ago. I've double-checked the readings. The other ships have confirmed. And, incredibly, there's also a noticeable increase in the number of targets. It feels like, yes, they've tapped into the reactor and somehow increasing its output are using its energy for their own needs. They're, by Valen, Shayalith, they're literally devouring the city. What about the message? Is there a response? Checking. Yes. The official answer from the Grey Council. Surprise was evident in Elite's voice. They are sending 4 more cruisers and 10 transports to take everyone out. If there is anyone to rescue in 5 days, we must hold out. Any losses? The residents have evacuated. The captain's assistant breathed a sigh of relief, looking at the sensor readings. For some unknown reason, the spiders allowed 5 planetary transports to escape. Almost the entire population of the city is there. Someone probably left on their own. As soon as they leave for a safe distance, give a concentrated salvo from all cruisers at the central building. Shayalit looked angrily at the overview screen. Yes, sir. The Minbari's fingers ran over the crystals again, coordinating the position of the 4 ships in orbit around Shalekta. After a minute, which was required for the cruisers to take up the necessary positions, the ship again shook slightly and 4 bright beams appeared in the field of vision, striking downwards. The small crystalline tower of the city's main building vanished in a faint flash and a cloud of raised dust, the upper floors of the building simply ceasing to exist in an instant. Long seconds later, when the guns ceased firing, the captain of the Stravi stared tensely at the view screen, waiting for the raised dust to settle. Report? There's a cloud of interference on the sensors. We're waiting for the aftermath of the shot to subside. In the name of Valen. It seemed that this phrase would soon become a habit for the young representative of the warrior caste. As soon as the sensors were able to get to the place of the shot, the Minbari saw that the attack, which had vaporized the building and destroyed the neighboring ones, had caused absolutely no visible damage to the enemy. When the raised dust settled, the observers saw the same busy swarming spiders, a solid layer covering all the internal passages of the building below a certain floor and continuing to disassemble it into the smallest elements. No reaction was recorded. All damage was done only to the buildings around them, Elite reported in a low voice. Continue firing when ready. I'll level this mountain range if it helps stop them. Send the remaining ships to Shalkria. But there's nothing to do here anymore. Besides, the spiders are going there, and those that are left. There are too few of them to pay attention to when the last remaining settlement is under threat. Send the cruisers, I said. Yes, sir. Shayalit. The city should have been evacuated by now. All available transport is waiting for ships from Minbar at the assembly point. Good. Saran looked grimly at the overview screen. When the ships reach the desired orbit, give the order to open fire. Destroy the Shalkri. Shayalit. It was necessary to do this after the destruction of Korone, and now we have provided them with food and energy. I repeat the order to open fire on the ships entering orbit above the city. Wipe it off the face of the planet. The captain turned away gloomily from the picture of the ships slowly approaching their target. His warrior nature was indignant that he had essentially surrendered the colony to the enemy, losing the cities, and now ordering the destruction of the last of them. And the almost completely intact population did not raise his spirits at all. But after 5 days of fruitless attempts to deal with the invader, he no longer saw any other way out. She'alit. What else is there? The captain turned gloomily to the assistant. They managed to... Under the relieved gaze of the Minbari, a scattering of flashes sparkled against the backdrop of the stars, unfolding into transition zones through which the ships promised by the Grey Council emerged. She'alith Seran. A communication window appeared in the middle of the overview screen. This is She'alith Tharol. The Grey Council sent us to help you. While the transports are preparing to take the inhabitants on board, give us the details. What has changed on the planet? She'alith Tharol. Seran nodded briefly. You arrived just in time. All the cities are lost. At the moment only Shalkree remains, but I was already ready to give the command for orbital bombardment. What are you talking about? She'alith Tharol. Seran interrupted the Minbari grimly. The enemy is hunting for our technology and resources. All the other cities were literally eaten. It is my fault that I did not make such a decision immediately after the loss of Korone, and I will answer for it to the Great Council if I have to. But for now... I see. Terrell raised his hand, stopping his interlocutor. The transporters will now take out the residents, and we will attack. But... Yes, we know that all your attacks have failed. Therefore, the Grey Council has authorized the use of weapons for planetary bombardment. They have decided that it is cheaper to restore the planet's ecosystem than to abandon the colony. Silence reigned on the bridge of the Stravi. Planetary bombardment. It had been a long time since the Minbari had resorted to such a method of warfare. Even during the Earth-Minbari War, when the Minbari fleets approached Earth itself, no one was going to wage a war of total annihilation of the race. Destroy the infrastructure, yes. Punish the Earthlings for the murder of their leader, of course. But weapons of mass destruction, although they were in service on the ships, were never used. Considering the conversation over, the captain nodded to Saran and disconnected. While the Minbari shuttles were descending to the planet's surface, the arriving cruisers were taking up positions above the colony's captured cities. Even after finishing devouring one city and heading to the next, the spiders left a decent number of their brethren in their original place. As before, the spider-like invaders ignored the Minbari completely, neither reacting to the ships descending from above to fetch the refugees, nor to the cruisers in low orbit preparing to attack them. They continued to bustle about calmly among the remains of the recycled cities. Readiness number 1. Saran's ship has taken a convenient position to observe what is happening. Half an hour later, when the shuttles, loaded to the brim with the surviving inhabitants of the colony, hastily left the planet, heading towards the transition zone to wait there for the end of the battle, the arriving reinforcement cruisers settled in high orbit above all the cities. A bright, sparkling droplet, shrouded in a cloud of flashes, separated from the hull of one of the ships hovering just above Korone and rapidly gaining speed, began to fall down into the atmosphere. A few seconds later, violating all laws of physics, the droplet reached the surface, and below everything was drowned in a bright white flash, only partially softened by light filters in distance. By Valen. They started right from the mass driver, muttered Alith. As quickly as it flared up, the miniature star of light died down, revealing to the observers a huge circle of scorched surface and a crater at the point of impact. Saran stood tensely in front of the observation screen, peering at what was happening below. As soon as the dust raised by the explosion settled and the sensors were able to break through the multiple interferences, the observers could not hold back a shocked cry. Nothing happened. In the very center of the crater, in the very place where the foundation of the central city building was located, spiders were swarming calmly, as if there had been no monstrous explosion. No, judging by the sensor readings, their number decreased by about 15%. But this was absolutely not the result that everyone around expected. One of the most powerful types of weapons of mass destruction for the first time in the history of its use was unable to destroy the target. Unbelievable, came from the captain's assistant. The next moment, the cruiser, clearly not wanting to give up so quickly, sent a small capsule to the surface, which quickly skimmed the atmosphere with a fiery trail and disappeared against the background of the Earth. An expression of extreme amazement and doubt appeared on the captain's face, who was watching what was happening with great intensity. They used antimatter too? The next moment, the flash of an explosion flashed below again. This time it was so bright that the ship's intelligence completely extinguished the overview screen, saving the crew from being blinded. But even if they could see everything that was happening, they would not believe their eyes, as in the case of the mass driver. In the first moment, the spiders that fell into the epicenter of the explosion were completely destroyed, annihilated by the interaction with the antimatter projectile. But even there, the success ended. Having lost another 20% of their number, the spiders as a whole remained unharmed, even, it seemed, began to move more actively. Reading the information from the sensor array, Saran could not believe his eyes. His first conclusion was confirmed. Their attacks, seemingly destructive and terrible at first, were then simply absorbed by the target, not only not killing them, but even providing additional energy. She'alith Thurl, Saran called the captain of the attacking cruiser. Did your sensors record this? Yes, we see. It looks like they're absorbing the energy of the explosion, channeling it to their own benefit. Well, let's see how much they can digest before they choke. What do you? All cruisers, open fire! Each on its own target! Mass driver and then annihilation bomb! In a row! But, She'alit Saran, his interlocutor interrupted him again. You asked for help? Here it is. Don't interfere. We will solve the problem of the invasion ourselves. The captain cut the connection, and a second later all the ships opened fire, unleashing an all-destroying force on the planet's surface. And only in Saran's eyes, who began to assume that even with such weapons this enemy was beyond their reach, did doubt begin to appear about the correctness of what was happening. She'alit, the assistant, who had been closely reading the instrument readings, called out to the captain quietly and almost timidly. What else? Look at the instruments. What? In the name of Valen, Saran breathed out. The devices, carefully recording everything that was happening, phlegmatically displayed the complete futility of the attack. There were not even the slightest losses like the first time. When the dust settled, all the spiders were still calmly going about their business, bustling about below. Although, the universe sees, on most of the surface there was nothing left, alive or not, only bare stone. She'alit, look. Turning to the newly turned-on overview screen at the surprised exclamation, the captain himself froze with wide eyes. Not far from the planet, huge transition zones slowly and majestically opened up. One after another, funnels appeared, from which huge ships in the form of pyramids flew out, around the base of which a triangular structure with thin protruding spikes was built. Completely ignoring the warships hanging in orbit, the pyramids slowly headed towards the surface of the planet. The only thing we need is... The captain, like the entire Minbari fleet of course, had received information about the new race that had unexpectedly appeared near Babylon 5, as had information about what had happened to the Drasi ships that had attacked the alien. But the footage that Ambassador Delenn had sent home could not fully convey the feeling that Saran had experienced when he looked at the huge silhouettes. What are your orders? At that moment, She'alit didn't even think to scold his assistant for the voice that had wavered in an unbecoming manner for a warrior. Minbar gave orders not to enter into conflict or provoke their aggression under any circumstances. Saran's jaw muscles began to twitch. I really hope that Thurl is smart enough not to attack them. She'alit, we're receiving a message. No video, just a text message. Incredibly, it's transmitted in all 3 dialects at once, even... Alit swallowed. It seems. Even in the grey language. Show me. The officer complied, and the Colony Defense Squadron commander saw lines of Minbari language appear before his eyes. Minbari ships. Our arrival is not intended to be aggressive. Do not interfere with our mission, and no one will be harmed. Any attack from you will be met with an adequate response from our side. What are they? Saran looked at the overview screen with disbelief, turned his gaze to the sensor readings calculating the ship's trajectory, looked at the screen again. They're not slowing down. Are they going to enter the atmosphere? By a lucky coincidence, Thurl still did not dare to attack the new participants of the show, apparently remembering in time who these ships belonged to and what the Grey Council had ordered regarding them. Under the dumbfounded gaze of the Minbari observers, the pyramid ships took up positions above all the captured cities, slightly to the side of the Minbari Charlene, and calmly began to descend down into the atmosphere, completely ignoring the simple fact that such large and absolutely aerodynamic objects should, in fact, simply crumble under their own weight. "Unknown energy surges detected," Elite reported, waving his hands over the crystals of the control panel, directed towards the surface from each of the ships. "The number of spiders is decreasing." "It can't be. What else? They do something with them?" "There are fewer and fewer of them, literally in seconds." "Destroying?" Saran leaned forward. "I don't know. We can't understand what it is. Only the fact that the number of objects below is decreasing. Send a probe there. Maybe we'll be able to see something." A small device separated from the cruiser and smoothly headed towards the nearest pyramid ship. A few seconds later, a separate image appeared in the observation area, transmitted from the observation device. Here, the huge pyramid continues to descend into the atmosphere, pushing aside the rare clouds and, in places, illuminating the surrounding space with strange flashes. Here, from somewhere under the pyramid, a beam of bright white rays strikes down, accompanied by a grinding sound, covering a group of spiders, literally in a split second becoming more and more transparent, until they disappear in this light. In a matter of minutes, everything was over. The arriving ships cleared Shelekta of the arachnid invaders, and just as slowly began to rise from the atmosphere back into space. All that remained on the planet were smoking craters in the places of bombing, and almost completely destroyed nature around the former cities. Ignoring the cruisers that were tensely tracking them, the pyramids moved away from the planet at some distance, and just as calmly as they had arrived, dived into the open transition zones, disappearing into the depths of degenerate space. Level 17 is not listed. May the chief paranoid rest in peace, the entire Babylon 5 universe, and the best security chief in history. The younger ones showed their best side, once again confirming the Replicator's title as one of the most serious forces in inhabited space. I believe they would have shown themselves worthy even in a clash with the old-school Borg from the famous cinematic universe. And I would not even guarantee that the Borg would have had a tangible chance. So in the case of the Minbari, everything went within the expected framework. The main caliber of their Charlene turned out to be, of course, unpleasant news. But the adaptive abilities of the replicators did not fail. The main achievement of the whole operation was the receipt of a huge volume of already purified and industrially processed materials. The smaller part was quickly sorted and assembled into blocks ready for transfer to any convenient place, taking care to shield them from the Minbari scanners, and the smaller part was used as building material for the same spiders, pretending to be active. Both of these resources were then lifted on board by the ships of the rescue mission, using the Asgard beam. As a result, in an insignificantly short period of time, I received enough new blocks to build 15 additional ships of the Super Hat-Tak class, and still had enough left for a couple of regular ones. An additional advantage was the access to the Minbar information space, an analog of the same internet, obtained during the dismantling of the cities. And what is even more pleasant, the closed internal networks of bases, laboratories, and training centers. Of course, all this wealth had protection, and by local standards could be considered excellent. But the replicators were used to breaking even the 348-stage protection of the Asgard computer systems. In general, I got to a lot of interesting data, especially since the colony belonged to the warrior caste, and therefore, the specifics of the data received corresponded. For example, the received specification for some technological solutions of Minbari shipbuilding was curious. The saying, "necessity is the mother of invention," is very appropriate here. In the native universe of the replicators, almost all developed civilizations were too developed. Even Earthlings had the same technology for creating energy shields, yes, having stolen it from the Goa'uld. But is it so important? After all, having received it, they were drawn into the general flow, bypassing all intermediate stages, and in the future, they will develop shields as a priority direction for ensuring the protection of their ships. Here the situation was different. Not a single civilization had shields, but at the same time, they had weapons that were quite comparable in destructive characteristics to the level of the Goa'uld during the reign of Ra, and, recalling the planet-killing ships of the Vorlons, and much more destructive than the best developments of the Asgards. And this weapon had to be countered somehow, without shields, without the absorbent capabilities of replicators, without natural super-strong materials. only on the processing of ordinary elements of the periodic table and effective angles of inclination of armor. And we must give credit to the locals. They achieved success. Some alloys were suitable for creating blocks not much smaller than trinium, and at the same time were easily synthesized on an industrial scale. A number of design solutions also deserved close attention, especially if I want to diversify the nomenclature of my official fleet. And of course, the developments in the field of strengthening the power set of ships could not be ignored. After optimization and adjustment to the block replicator architecture, this should increase the combat survivability of the same super hattacks by at least 10%. By the way, it was curious to learn that all Charlan cruisers were equipped with a fairly sophisticated and developed artificial intelligence, though it was aimed more at helping with piloting and performing combat missions. It became clear why people, who mostly relied on their personal efforts in piloting, got into such trouble during the Earth-Minbari War, although in terms of weapons and fleet size they were far from fatally inferior to their opponents. Perhaps the jamming system that prevented enemy weapons from being aimed gave the Minbari an additional trump card. Things were a little less interesting with gravity technologies. Any race absorbed by the replicators had come to operate with gravity long ago, and yet another method, especially one that had not been perfected, was not a discovery. The only interesting thing was their beam weapon. Compared to the replicators' weapons, it certainly didn't look good. Short range, depressing rate of fire, not to mention power, but the efficiency was good there. This point alone was worth adding this technology to the replicator's existing one and spending some of the computing power on modernization. Returning to the events on Shelekta, of course, I was watching what was happening in real time. In addition to a small theatrical performance for our comb-like friends, its purpose was to test my new assistant. The computing power available to me had finally finished constructing an artificial intelligence for her. It was just a matter of adjusting the obtained result to the subjectively required character parameters for me. Well, and to look at her successes in her first independent voyage. In my opinion, it turned out great. But the final assessment will be the reaction of the ambassadors at the station, which simply cannot but happen. Interlude. This is unthinkable impudence. We can't just let this attack go. Our colony has effectively ceased to exist. 3 gray-robed figures stood in a circle of light in the pitch-dark chamber, gesticulating angrily under the gaze of the remaining 6 members of the Grey Council. The footage captured by the probes at the devastated colony was frozen in the viewing area above them, and Shayalith Saran himself, summoned by the Council as a witness, stood in the center of the circle, gloomily examining the footage he had witnessed. "Shut up!" The head of the Council, one of the figures holding a silver staff with a triluminary at the top, stepped forward. The warrior caste always thinks only of battles. It was for this reason that when Valen first convened the Grey Council, he willed that there be 9 of us, 3 from each of the castes of our people, not to drag the Minbari into wars, but to guide our people wisely. The indignant advisors fell silent, now expressing their indignation only with clenched fists and a general atmosphere of tension. The incident on the Shelekta colony was a very offensive and tangible slap in the face to the pride of the militant part of the Minbari race. No one had dared to attack worlds belonging to them so unceremoniously and brazenly for a very, very long time. Shayalith Saran, tell the Council what exactly happened on the colony. The probe records are good, but they clearly don't tell the whole story. Satai, Saran bowed. As usual, we were patrolling the colony system. This was both training for new recruits and routine security. On one of the cruisers, the sensors detected a short disturbance in space, corresponding to the formation of a transition zone. Did someone get into the system? We decided so too, the Minbari nodded. But apart from the funnel, which closed almost immediately, the sensors didn't detect anything. However, as subsequent events showed, there was an invasion after all. I suppose we just couldn't see it. You missed the enemy, lost the colony, miraculously avoided casualties among the population, and you say that you couldn't see? Quiet, the advisor with the staff shouted again. Yes, we couldn't detect anything, even though I ordered our ships to comb the system. When we discovered the alien on the planet, it was already too late. These spiders, unknown creatures, mechanisms. I don't know. Saran shook his head irritably. We discovered them on the planet when they, quickly multiplying, were heading towards the first city. The attack of the fighters led to nothing, and I gave the order to fire a salvo with the main caliber from the cruiser. The council listened without interrupting, although the figures of the three from the warrior caste simply screamed with their poses about the desire to say many different things. But even this was not enough. It was as if they adapted to our weapons, literally in a matter of seconds, ceasing to react to attacks altogether. Do you realize how unimaginable this sounds? Nothing unimaginable. Another figure interrupted the speaker. What? We know nothing about these intruders. So why should we assume that what is happening is unimaginable or ordinary? The figure stared at his gray council colleague through his low hood for a few seconds until he nodded his head in agreement. Shealith Saran, you have called for help from the metropolis? They used other weapons too, haven't they? That's right. It became obvious that the cities were lost to us anyway, and they used weapons of mass destruction for orbital bombardments. And how did the enemy react? No way. Saran shook his head. At the moment of the explosions, the sensors detected strange energy fluctuations that usually did not accompany annihilation or mass drivers, but they did not cause any significant damage to the targets on the surface. And then they appeared. He nodded at the observation area displaying the moment of the pyramid ship's arrival, having gloomily watched once again as the ships, like two peas in a pod similar to Baal's ship, descended into the atmosphere, did something with the spiders and flew away. Ignoring the Minbari cruisers, the members of the Grey Council exchanged glances, and the head of the council turned to Saran. The ships that arrived. The sensors didn't note what exactly they were doing with the spiders on the surface. Perhaps you have some ideas? The probes couldn't determine the type of impact. The Minbari shook his head, but visually it looked like they were simply disappearing. Saran gritted his teeth and looked at the head of the council. I belong to the warrior caste, although my mother was from the priest caste. My choice was made long ago and is not subject to doubt, but whatever the ships that arrived on Shilekta were doing, whatever their master's goals were, I would not risk starting a conflict with them. It would bring nothing to the people of Minbar. There was silence in the council chamber for a while as the figures looked at each other in silence. We thank you, Shealith Saran, for your thoughts. Now you can leave us. The council will not detain you any longer. The head of the council waved his staff. Having waited until the captain left the meeting room, the figures threw back their hoods, looking at each other gloomily. I agree with the opinion of Shealith Saran. Delenn spoke up. This is an insult. A colony belonging to the warrior caste was effectively destroyed, and it is up to us to decide how to respond to this. The warrior caste has always been famous for its reluctance to seek peaceful solutions to problems. Delenn stepped into the center of the circle, standing opposite the militantly minded advisor, but the Grey Council must take a broader view. The warrior caste once followed the council's decision. We don't intend to do it again. Calm down. We have heard the opinion of Delenn, speaking for the priest caste. We know the opinion of the warrior caste. It remains to find out the position of the builder caste. We must restore what was destroyed. The builder caste always remains outside of politics and wars. One of the three builders stepped forward. Our colony was destroyed, but not a single caste has evidence that the owners of the ships that arrived were responsible for the attack itself. Every war waged by the people of Minbar always places a burden on everyone. But it is we, the builder caste, who have to bear the burden of eliminating the consequences of this. You always spat on honor, but we didn't spit on life. Life has no meaning without honor, and it is not for the builder caste to understand this. Stop it. Baal's race is not an opponent you can rush at without thinking, and we don't even know. That's why we need to find out. Delenn, you. Enough. The Grey Council has made its decision. Minbar cannot afford to risk another war, which would be inevitable if the warrior caste took matters into its own hands. But we cannot trust the priest caste to do the same either. Valen was wise to create the Grey Council as it is now. So we will follow his example in deciding what to do in this situation. Every caste of our people must contribute to the investigation of the attack on the colony. We will make a final decision on what to do next, only after we have all the information. We cannot afford to make a mistake. Delenn, as the Minbari representative on the station, you must learn all you can from Lord Baal himself. If his ships have come to Shilekta, Then his empire must know what they are. I believe he must have an explanation. The speaker glanced at the rest of the Grey Council, signaling that the meeting was over. The warrior caste councillors, clearly dissatisfied with the decision, glared at the council leader for a moment, but then they bowed their heads abruptly, pulled their hoods up, and stepped back, seeming to disappear into the surrounding darkness. A moment later, the other figures followed suit. Do you know the name of the victim? According to the ship's papers, her name is Gayla Lopez. She's a traitor, and she came from Sector 47. But this is the Minbari sector? Sinclair looked at the head of security, puzzled. And their ship, and their clothes, and even their ID. Garibaldi let the commander through the opened elevator doors and continued. Only she's not a Minbari. Did Natoth explain the reason for the attack? Nothing intelligible. When she was pulled away from the victim, she only repeated with hatred, "Bringer of death." Bringing death? Exactly. Does that name ring a bell? Garibaldi raised an eyebrow at Sinclair. Yes, I do. The rest of the journey to the cell where the Narn was currently being held was silent. Everyone was considering the information they had received. Narns were known for their short temper, but still, such incidents were rare. Especially no one expected such a thing from Ambassador Gakar's assistant, including the ambassador himself. Natoth, Sinclair began from the doorway. Why did you attack this woman? Listen, sister. Seeing that Gakar's assistant was not going to answer, Garibaldi stepped forward. If she dies, we will put you in a cage for the rest of your days. Natoth, stopping the head of security who had clearly entered the role of bad cop with a gesture, Sinclair came closer to the table. We want to help you, but you have to explain everything to us. This is Shankar, the detainee spoke darkly. A blood feud. When Dilgar captured Halak 7, my grandfather and his family were there. The Deathbringer conducted her experiments on them. Everyone died except my grandfather. He managed to escape, but she managed to implant a device in his brain, which eventually drove him mad and killed him. There was undisguised hatred in Natoth's voice. When this happened, my family swore a blood oath, and now the time of reckoning has come. The Dilgar attack happened over 30 years ago, Sinclair said, slightly confused. The Deathbringer would have been an old woman. Her image is forever imprinted in my mind. The Narnka leaned forward. I feel the blood of my family on her hands. I tell you, it's her. Sinclair pulled Garibaldi aside and leaned close to his ear. He spoke quietly, but Natoth could tell that the commander had ordered a check of her victim's quarters to find out everything they could about her. It seemed that even if Sinclair had doubts that this was truly the Deathbringer, he was not about to let it slide until he had the details sorted out. The security chief nodded and walked quickly out of the room, narrowly missing the Narn ambassador in the hallway. Commander Sinclair? Gakar, gesturing, almost flew towards Sinclair. Please accept my sincere apologies for this terrible incident. I cannot imagine what suddenly came over my attaché. Let me assure you, I am personally ready to compensate the victim. Her victim is in the infirmary now. If she survives, I will pass on your offer to her. Thank you, Commander. The ambassador nodded. If you release Natoth, I am ready to take responsibility for her behavior. The Narn, with an extremely displeased face, glanced at his assistant, who had fallen silent in her chair. Given the circumstances of the case, this is impossible. Sinclair shook his head. Nevertheless, I am prepared to place her under house arrest for the duration of the investigation. I am grateful to you, Commander Sinclair. Gakar bowed, then turned to his assistant. Natoth. The ambassador turned abruptly and left the room. His assistant followed, pausing for a moment beside Sinclair and giving him an exaggeratedly formal bow. I'm sorry to have brought shame upon you, Ambassador, but I had to perform the Shankar. Don't apologize, Natoth. Gakar walked to the bar built into the furniture in his cabin and busily poured a clear liquid into a glass, handing it to his assistant. I understand perfectly well how you were burning with the desire to grab her by the throat. I also have blood enemies, and many of them. But unfortunately your attack complicated our task. I don't understand. The Narnka looked at the ambassador in confusion, taking the offered glass. Advisor Harog, whom you were waiting for at customs, arrived here precisely to conclude a deal with Jadur. We learned that she had made a discovery of great value to Narn. Alas, after your attack, he could no longer approach her without attracting the attention of the Earthlings. Therefore, Gakar spread his hands, he returned home, and I was instructed to take possession of her discovery. We will take possession of it when I tear her to pieces. No, the ambassador shook his head. The Kari demanded that she be delivered to Narn, alive. I will not give up revenge. Natoth jumped up from her seat. This is much more important than the Shonkar. The Narns will gain an advantage over the enemy. They will crush him and expand the regime's domain. You will have to make this sacrifice for the future of our race. Each of the Narns has to make sacrifices. I will put my revenge aside. Natoth breathed through her teeth. But I will never give it up. Otherwise you wouldn't be a Narn. The ambassador looked intently into the eyes of his assistant. I'm proud of you. And when we get what we need from this reptile, I promise you will fulfill your oath. Lenia walked through the Babylon 5 trade sector with a curious expression on his face. Delenn was not on the station. No one had any urgent business for him personally, since he had only recently been appointed her assistant, so the Minbari indulged in pure contemplation. Almost everything on the human station was new to him, so strikingly different from the familiar architecture of his home world. Mr. Lenier came from behind. Turning around, the Minbari saw the station commander walking purposefully in his direction. Commander, I apologize for disturbing you, but Ambassador Delenn is away, and I need your help. Have you heard about the incident at Customs? Yes, it's terrible. Shaking his head, Lenier, out of old habit, slowly moved forward, forcing Sinclair to follow him. It seems the Narns are very hot-tempered. Are you familiar with the name Deathbringer? Very good. I am interested in history. As far as I remember, she led the Dilgar invasion of the non-aligned worlds. She was a brilliant scientist, specializing in biogenetics and cyberorganics, but she was also a sadist who knew no mercy. Natoth said, Sinclair interrupted the flow of historical information pouring out from Lenier, stopping him by the shoulder and turning him to face him, that the woman she attacked at Customs was the Deathbringer. Coming to, she confirmed her words and added that the Steel Blades had provided her with refuge. The Steel Blades, Delenn's assistant looked slightly surprised. The most warlike of our castes. But even they wouldn't harbor a monster like Jadur. They needed her. Could you contact the Council and find out what they know? Sorry, Commander. I don't have the right to address the Council, but I will contact Delenn. Thank you, Sinclair nodded. I also ask you not to spread this information, at least for now. You can rely on me, Commander. Bowing, Lenier headed towards the elevator, leaving Sinclair alone. Watching the Minbari go, the commander headed to his office with a gloomy expression. This guest was nothing but trouble. The attack by the ambassador's assistant was okay. Diplomats often pulled off even worse stunts, but the decision of the Earth government worried him much more. The news that Jadur had created a medicine that could grant immortality to representatives of any species, and wanted to put it up for auction, was in itself capable of unleashing a global war. And the fact that the creator of this medicine was a war criminal, guilty of millions of deaths and wanted by all the worlds of the League. At that moment, he once again felt very keenly that he wanted to retire. Away from Babylon 5 and all these constantly occurring incidents, every second of which threatened, if not a military conflict, then at least the destruction of the station. All hope remained only on Delenn with her ability to find a compromise in any situation. And Lord Baal was an unaccounted factor, however, with his whole appearance and behavior saying that he was for order and peace in his surroundings. Lord Baal. Remembering the new after, Sinclair grimaced with a painful look, immediately recalling all the oddities associated with this alien, and in advance with horror, imagining what he could do if he was invited to a council meeting dedicated to the latest events. And not inviting him would not work. If anything, Sinclair thought, he himself would come, without asking anyone. Interestingly, it seems that the incident at the checkpoint, which the entire station has been discussing for the second day, was not a simple fight. The guards looked very wary at any Narn who appeared within sight, and there were more of them than usual. True, the Narns themselves tried not to stand out too much. Gakar had clearly given his compatriots a lecture on the rules of conduct in public places. While I was waiting until the arrival of my assistant, I sat patiently in one of the chairs in the VIP waiting room, looking at the few inhabitants of the station who were constantly flashing back and forth, heading for departure, or, on the contrary, having just arrived at Babylon 5. "Lord Baal," Sinclair called out to me from the passage. "I wonder if the station commander is personally looking for one of the ambassadors." "Good afternoon, Commander Sinclair." I stand up with a welcoming smile and make a slight bow. "Are you waiting for someone? Or did you just decide to dilute the dull bureaucracy of your position with a walk?" Not quite." The man came closer, clearly grimacing at the words about bureaucracy. "I assume you are aware of the latest events at the station. Are you talking about the attack by Ambassador Gakar's assistant on one of the people who arrived at the station?" "Yes." I nod. "I heard about it, though without any particular details." "We tried to hush it up, but—" Sinclair spread his hands. "New information changed the situation." "Really?" "Yes," the man sighed. "Lord Baal, an unscheduled meeting of the council is planned. Would you like to join?" Yes, Commander." I nod with a smile. "I will definitely come. I just need to meet my assistant. She should show up any minute. Literally in 5 or 4. "Assistant?" Sinclair frowned. "Well, yes. Remember? I asked you when it would be possible to accept the ship with my deputy, since I have already registered with you as an ambassador." A flash of recollection crossed the man's face, and he was about to answer something when the communicator on his hand quietly beeped, and Ivanova's voice came from it. "Commander Sinclair." The woman's voice was slightly confused and nervous. Before answering, the commander demonstratively rolled his eyes and sighed heavily. "Listen, what happened, Lieutenant?" "A jump vortex, sir. A huge one. Just opened up just off to the side of our jump zone. And, my God, Commander, you should have seen that ship." "Wait a second. The documents have been transmitted." The woman was silent for a few seconds and then continued, stunned. "This is Ambassador Baal's assistant, requesting a corridor for the shuttle." Seeing Sinclair looking at me, I smile back and spread my hands slightly, as if to say, "Here's the assistant. I told you so." "Lieutenant Ivanova, tell the guest that Lord Baal is waiting for her at the 3rd Customs Terminal. Give a corridor to the embassy dock. There should be a place next to the ambassador's shuttle." The lieutenant hung up, and Sinclair stood there for a moment, clearly struggling with the urge to ask a question. Eventually, he overcame his curiosity, and trying to smile politely said, Since your assistant has arrived, if you wish to attend the meeting, then as soon as you have settled your affairs, we will be waiting for you in the council hall." "Of course, Commander. I will definitely be there." He nodded briefly and made an inviting gesture towards the inspection point, letting me go ahead. Smiling to myself, I headed towards the exit of the customs terminal to meet my deputy. I even wondered for a second what ship Korone had chosen to arrive at Babylon. Of course, I could have found out not even in a second, but in 1/1,000,000th of a second. But that was not interesting. I deliberately did not give her any instructions in this regard, so that I could once again see the effectiveness of the personality I had created. And in order not to spoil the impression, I diligently did not look at the information in the subspace replicator network that had to do with it. In addition, I was curious to combine my reaction, the reaction of the locals, and how she would justify her choice to me. So to speak, shake, but don't stir. It would definitely be an interesting conversation. A couple of minutes later, a stunned commotion was heard ahead, and then the reason for this commotion appeared. A short, slender girl with short green hair and emerald green eyes, definitely unusual for the locals. Korone was dressed in almost the same clothes as me, only for girls. A jacket, supposedly made of well-tanned leather. A skirt, long enough so that it would not be indecent. Almost black tights and leather half-boots. But the main feature of her appearance, which probably served as the main reason for the commotion, were the small, neat cat ears that adorned the girl's head. "Lord Baal?" Sinclair asked, slightly nervous. "Yes, Commander," I respond, with a wide smile already walking forward. Upon seeing me, the young, only a few days old, android stopped a few meters away from us. Her face was expressionless, just a bit of detached interest, but her ears twitched slightly, swinging to the sides. Lovely. Welcome to Babylon. I gently put one arm around her shoulders, unobtrusively pulling her forward. Commander, allow me to introduce Korone, my assistant. Greetings, the girl said evenly, beginning to carefully study Sinclair's face with her gaze. Ahem, the still stunned man said. It seemed he hadn't even paid attention to the words spoken, digesting the girl's appearance and especially her ears. Mutual. Korone. Are you confused by my appearance? Am I dressed in a manner that is not in accordance with the norms accepted here? If so, then I offer my official apologies. My boss, a quick glance in my direction. Seemingly just as indifferent, but brilliantly eloquent in telling everyone who is interested how disappointed she is in me, did not provide the necessary information on the traditions of the local species. Huh? No, everything is fine, the officer hastened to assure. It's just... Ahem, tell me, Korone, what are your duties? Jeffrey finally moved away from the topic of his surprise. I am Lord Baal's personal observer. Observer? In your terms, this role combines the duties of a bodyguard, secretary, special assistant, maid, psychotherapist, and executioner. In this case, my job is to ensure that he carries out his duties as a representative of the Empire at the proper level. Sinclair was a pitiful sight. Trying to combine all of the above in his imagination was clearly causing him real physical torment. I couldn't resist and touched the area of Korone's mind in the subspace replicator network. Not to clarify about the executioner, the idea was mine anyway, but to convey my admiration for the ingenious eating of the brain of an unfortunate man. I created the monster. I am incredibly proud of him. I beg your pardon. I probably didn't fully understand. Having somehow controlled his face, the commander began very carefully. What does assigned executioner mean? This means that I must carry out the liquidation of the supervised person in the event that he implements points 3 and 5 of the 7th paragraph of the Sholva Directive. Oh, was all the officer could say. It's common practice in the Empire, Commander. I smile. Don't worry about it. The Lilidans are completely objective in these matters. Okay. The man didn't understand anything, but decided not to focus on it. I believe Lord Baal will show you to his apartments, where the attaché's room is located. And I have to take my leave. There are matters that require my attention. Oh, it's okay, Commander. I was very pleased to see you. Having bowed to Sinclair and suppressed the desire to hug my attaché once more, I head towards the elevator. The girl follows me slightly behind and to the right, her whole appearance radiating utmost indifference to the world around her. You were excellent, I begin the dialogue, deliberately not switching to subspace communication. However, I spoke in the Goa'uld language, so no outsider would understand anything anyway. Your tastes cannot be called logical, she answered in the same language. However, you liked it. And a short touch to her mind was enough to catch how she herself enjoyed torturing Sinclair. This is also your fault. Korone shifted the arrows without blinking an eye. I was created in accordance with your illogical preferences, which means I bear no responsibility. Good position, I smiled. So, no matter what you do, it's my fault? That's your handwriting, Lilidan confirmed solemnly. Speaking of the name, I took it from the same place as the image of Korone. Why reinvent the wheel when everything has been invented before us? Since I decided to give my assistant such an exotic appearance, I needed to come up with a name for her species. And here, android was completely out of place, unlike the incomprehensible Lilidan. The same fact that they are the same thing. Well, who cares? Hey. The rest of the journey to the embassy sector was spent in relative silence, diluted only by slight expressions of curiosity from Korone, who was getting into character, my answers about the purpose of this or that place, and the puzzled and curious glances of passers-by. I wasn't planning on taking my assistant to the council meeting yet, so Korone stayed in the cabin, pretending to settle in, and I headed to the meeting room, fighting a slight curiosity to spy on what kind of ship she had chosen as transport that had made such an impression on Ivanova. But I still held back. It would be at the station for a while, so I would have time to see it in person. We are sitting on a powder keg. At least now she can't escape retribution, Michael. Don't flatter yourself. The Narns and Centauri collaborated with Dilgar. They won't want to judge her. True, but the Council will not be able to gather a majority of votes, and the League will decide her fate. And Kosh refuses to participate, as usual. It's nice that something in the galaxy doesn't change, isn't it, Commander? I approached the talking men with a smile. Good afternoon, Mr. Garibaldi. Commander, I apologize if I kept you waiting. It's okay, Lord Baal. The Centauri ambassador is late as usual anyway. Has your assistant settled in? Yes, thank you. Everything is as good as possible. I beg your pardon, but I will take my leave. My presence is not needed at the Council, and I still need to check the security. Garibaldi bowed briefly and headed towards the exit of the hall. Well, Lord Baal, Sinclair headed to the chair. Before the Council begins, allow me to bring you up to speed. If it's not too much trouble, I nod. The woman Natoth attacked is a Dilgar. A couple of decades ago they were a great nuisance to many races of the League of Non-Aligned Worlds, distinguished by their particular cruelty in warfare. This woman, Sinclair sat down in his place, gesturing for me to move one of the chairs standing against the wall, is Jadur, a notorious Dilgar warlord, involved in the most notorious and bloody acts and inhuman experiments on prisoners. From what I've learned about the Narns, does Ambassador Gakar's assistant have some kind of personal score to settle with her? Yes, it is Shankar. Sacred blood feud. Jadur killed all her relatives during the war. I will add that she did not kill them in battle. And why did she show up on Babylon? She must have understood that if she was so famous, then she would definitely be recognized at a major station. It's a murky story. The commander sighed wearily, looking around the room, thinking for a moment. But all the races want to get their hands on her, some to kill her, and some think that she will help them in their military ambitions. They can be understood. And now you have decided to convene the council in order to... So, the loud voice of a broadly smiling Londo Mallory interrupted me mid-sentence. I should not trust rumors. With a mocking expression on his face, the Centauri waved his hands around the hall full of ambassadors. With a nod of my head, indicating to Sinclair, who was looking at me questioningly, that I was not offended, I leaned back in my chair, turning to Londo. Good day, Lord Baal. You were also kept in the dark? Eh? I apologize, Ambassador, but we were trying to avoid publicity. Oh, yeah. Londo laughed. You did it brilliantly. Sinclair could only shrug his shoulders at the ambassador's undisguised sarcasm. A young Minbari walked through the door, walked straight to the table, and sat down next to Sinclair. He gave me a slightly surprised look, but still smiled pleasantly and bowed slightly. It looks like this is Delen's assistant? So she won't be here herself? Curious. Another minute later, Gakar entered the hall, and then Garibaldi appeared in the passage, nodded to Sinclair, who looked at him and stood near the entrance, leaning his back against the wall. Well, everyone is here, he began, moving his chair closer to the table. We can begin the meeting. Gentlemen. Busy with a lively discussion of the news, the League representatives simply ignored Sinclair's quiet voice, paying attention only after he used the chairman's gavel lying next to him on the table. I request the attention of the members of the Babylon 5 Assembly. Ambassador Kalika, representing the League of Non-Aligned Worlds, will open our meeting. 30 years ago, one of the Abai stood up. The Dilgar attacked our worlds, mercilessly destroying peoples and sowing horror and death. The ambassador stepped forward, pathetically addressing the council, and only thanks to the help of the Earth Commonwealth we managed to drive out the invaders and bring the main criminals to justice. All but one, the most cruel, the bringer of death. Hearing this nickname, the hall erupted in a noise of indignation and old hatred. Having calmed down with difficulty, the members of the League began to listen further. And now destiny itself has given her into our hands. Our League has decided by a majority vote that Jadur for crimes against peoples and races must be brought to justice here, on Babylon 5, and as soon as possible. We ask the Council to approve our decision. The room was once again filled with a murmur of approving voices discussing the speech of the Abai ambassador, who nodded to the Council and headed to his seat. Sinclair sighed wearily once more and turned to the Centauri ambassador. Ambassador Malari, This woman, Londo stood up, the bringer of death, is a fiend of hell. We Centauri mourn with you for the lives she has ruined. Nevertheless, well, you started so well and so heartfeltly. It seems that Londo, and therefore the Centauri Republic, has some kind of dirty trick that the League will not like. Since she has not committed any crimes against our Republic, I am forced to vote against. As soon as Mollery finished his speech, the hall was again filled with a polyphonic noise of indignant members of the League. This time Sinclair was able to restore order with great difficulty, although perhaps the Narn ambassador, who took the floor, helped him in this. I'm not surprised that the Centauri opposed the trial, G'Kar began mockingly. Everyone knows that the Dilgar were just mercenaries for their republic. It was you, Narns, who collaborated with this scum. Londo jumped up. A propaganda stunt by the Centaurians against our revolution. It's you. Enough. Sinclair clearly did not want to take part in yet another squabble between representatives of eternally warring nations who openly disliked each other. Ambassador G'Kar, you have the floor. And I ask you to avoid getting personal. The Narn regime is known for its heightened sense of justice. Therefore, we vote in favor. Before the satisfied shouts had time to spread through the hall, G'Kar decided to disappoint everyone. But on one condition, the trial must take place on Narn. We have maintained neutrality during this conflict, and this will definitely help ensure an impartial trial. The Narns have no right to judge Jadur. The Abai know full well of their collaboration with this monster. This proposal is unacceptable. In that case, we also vote against, the ambassador shrugged, sitting down. Ambassador Kirsch has declined to attend the meeting, Sinclair said, and his words almost seemed to add the word, as always. On behalf of the Earth Commonwealth, I vote yes. Mr. Lenier? Since Minbar was not involved in the conflict, we have no right to judge her. Therefore, we vote against. Waiting for another outburst of indignation, this time much louder, the commander turned in my direction, clearly trying to figure out whether the protocol provided for my participation, given that the empire I represented had absolutely nothing to do with the conflict under discussion. Shaking my head, I let Sinclair know that I had no desire to participate in the vote. Receiving a short nod in response, I again returned to contemplating the squabble flaring up in the council chamber. The members of the League have one vote. Therefore, the results are as follows: 3 votes against, 2 in favor. With 1 abstention, a sideways glance in my direction. We have not yet decided on Lord Baal's position on the Babylon 5 Council, but he has not expressed a desire to take part in the vote. That's right, Commander. I nod with a slight smile. The situation is ambiguous enough to abstain from participating in the vote altogether. Our empire strives not to draw conclusions on issues it doesn't have information about. In that case, I'm afraid we'll have to look for another solution to the problem. This is outrageous. Commander Sinclair, you always said that we have the right to vote. Why are you denying us this right now? No! The Abai ambassador cut Sinclair off sharply. We have had enough of compromises. We will no longer participate in this farce, but we will not leave it like this. The ambassador, with his head thrown back indignantly, and the rest of the League's representatives after him, rose from their seats and left the council chamber. After a while, only Sinclair, Lenier, and I remained. I beg your pardon, Commander, the Minbari said guiltily. I contributed to the criminal escaping punishment, but Jadur was harboring the steel blades, and your government knew about it. Oops. Steel blades? From the information the juniors got during the dismantling of the Minbari colony, I learned that much of the infrastructure of Shelekta belonged to this faction of the warrior caste. An interesting coincidence. Very interesting. No, Lenier shook his head. At first we didn't know. But when we were at war with Earth, the steel blades offered the Council a new terrible weapon, created by that monster. That's when the Council learned that they were hiding her. But then, as now, after so many years, it's hard to admit to such shameful actions. Attaché Delaine stood up, bowed briefly to Sinclair and then to me, and also left the council chamber without saying goodbye. Sinclair rested his chin on his clasped hands, looking grimly thoughtful. I don't think my participation in the vote would have changed anything, Commander. I get up from my chair. I don't know the whole picture, but it looks like this criminal has really pissed off the members of the League. If I were you, I would expect them to, make some abrupt moves. There are some Drazzies there after all. Damn it! Lord Baal, you are absolutely right. Please forgive me. Ivanov. The commander practically ran out of the room, calling the lieutenant on the communicator as he went. Shaking my head with a slight smile, I slowly head towards the elevator. If I'm right in my assumptions, very soon the ships of the League Worlds will show up at the station. Unless, of course, they were waiting somewhere nearby in case of such an outcome of the vote. Perhaps it's worth a look. Fortunately, there is an excellent observatory on Babylon. Lord Baal! A familiar call caught up with me right at the door. The Abai ambassador, that same strangely effeminate alien who spoke on behalf of all the worlds of the League and was most indignant at the Council's decision, was heading in my direction with a tense expression on his face. Behind him, lagging behind by 10 steps, were the other representatives. Ambassador Kalika Kvalmitsra. I nod with a friendly smile, stopping. Did you want something? Ahem. Lord Baal, you remained silent at the meeting and did not participate in the vote on the Deathbringer issue. But we would still like. I suppose you're wondering if the Goa'uld Empire is planning to intervene in this, conflict situation? Exactly. Kalika turned tensely, glancing at the grim Drazzi ambassador who had been glaring at me the whole time. Moreover, on behalf of all representatives of the League of Non-Aligned Worlds, I would like to formally apologize for the incident that took place immediately after your arrival on Babylon 5. Apology accepted? I nod. Although, of course, it would be more correct if they were brought by the Drazzi ambassador. But I understand how difficult it is to admit your own mistakes, and I smile as I note how the aforementioned ambassador's face twisted from my words. Nevertheless, as I already told Commander Sinclair, our empire tries not to interfere in events whose background it does not know. So, you can rest assured, I do not plan to interfere in what is happening. At least, as long as it does not directly affect me and the empire. Thank you, Lord Baal. Throwing another tense glance towards the Drazzi ambassador, Kalika bowed to me and headed back to his waiting colleagues, immediately starting to explain something to the clearly displeased Drazzi. Mentally shrugging my shoulders, I continued on my way to the observatory. Interlude. Ivanova. What do we have? Entering the bridge, Sinclair tried to catch his breath for a few seconds, but the answer to the question posed concerned him more than his own image and physical fitness. If you don't count this monster, then... The woman made a face that said something like, "We're drowning, Captain, and there are still sandwiches left. It's quiet for now." A monster? Jeffrey didn't immediately realize. Lieutenant! One of the operators interrupted Susan before she could answer. The ship is in the transition zone. It's a Drazzi frigate! Damn. Sinclair rushed to the observation window. Alarm. What the... Having barely glanced at space, the officer froze in shock. Against the backdrop of the planet below, a ship was majestically drifting, on which apparently the assistant of the Goa'uld ambassador had arrived. At least Jeffrey did not know anyone else who used pyramidal architecture in ships, and the ambassador of a strange empire was also gently hinted at by the size of the vessel, which even from a distance of tens of kilometers seemed indecently huge. How much? How long? Ivanova immediately understood the essence of the question. About 4 kilometers, we couldn't determine more precisely. The scanners were giving out a solid cloud of interference. I see, the man swallowed, unable to tear his gaze away from the black, slightly steel-like giant. I told you, Commander. You should have seen this ship. Ivanova chuckled nervously. But in this case, I believe its presence is to our advantage. The Drazzi clearly remembered what happened after their previous aggression against Baal's ship. Yes, that's right. The mention of Drazzi abruptly pulled the officer into the real world. Have they noticed him yet? I suppose. Susan glanced at the instrument readings. Yes. Meanwhile, the frigate, which had confidently flown out of the transition zone, having discovered an unaccounted-for factor near the station, sharply slowed down and attempted to contact the station. Drazzi here? Lieutenant Ivanova nodded, and Sinclair walked to the terminal. Babylon 5, this is Makar Ashok. The Drazzi on the screen was trying his best to appear menacing and serious, and he was doing a good job. but it was absolutely obvious that he was very, very nervous about the giant located near the station. On behalf of the Free Drazi Commonwealth, I demand the immediate surrender of the war criminal Jadur. If our demand is not met, he hesitated for a moment but still found the strength to continue. We are attacking the station. The ship is approaching the station's range. Weapons at combat readiness. Damn it. Activate the defense system. But don't open fire first. Susan turned to Sinclair. Commander, the League hasn't accepted the Council's decision? Alas. And Lord Baal? The woman glanced sideways at the huge ship. No, the commander shook his head. He's not going to interfere until the situation affects him personally. But, if we don't agree, the League will attack Babylon. That's what I hope for. I just hope I don't miscalculate. Makar Ashok, your ship is under fire. If you enter the zone, we will shoot without warning. With a hiss like an irritated snake, the Drazi pilot disconnected the connection. However, within seconds, his ship slowed down and then stopped completely. Glancing briefly at the sensors, Ivanova breathed a sigh of relief. He had clearly disabled the weapons. Lieutenant, the dispatcher's voice made the woman flinch. We are detecting a field disturbance. 3. No, 5 craters. There are ships of all the members of the League. Ivanova, can you distract them? I'll try. I hope you know what you're doing. Sinclair nodded and quickly left the bridge. There was a small chance to resolve the current crisis diplomatically, and since there were no immediate plans to attack Babylon, it was worth taking advantage of. Well, Korone surprised me. I admit, pleasantly surprised, which is important. So, the girl decided to combine business with pleasure. Having studied all the technical developments of Minbar and shipbuilding, especially the issue of armoring and optimization of the supporting structure, she combined this with the architecture of the replicators, the same one on which the design of the standard cruiser from blocks is based, and slightly supplemented it with stylization under the Goa'ulds. The result was something like a pyramid, standing as a base on a huge open claw of complex shape. The claw was 4,120 meters long, 1,140 meters wide, and 850 meters high. According to the calculated characteristics, this monster was 5 times superior to my super hat-tack in combat, or to be more precise, by 547.6247%. Why so many? It's all for the same reason. The architecture of the replicators. And that says it all. The real Goa'uld had fairly perfect conceptually combat ships, but compared to the block structure of the replicators, they were like riveted steam troughs of the early 20th century, compared to the missile-carrying nuclear submarines of the end. Even though I copied the super hat-tack only externally, that was enough to reduce the efficiency of the structure. And here, there is almost perfect optimization and mutual complementarity of 2 different concepts. Overall, Korone surprised me very pleasantly, which I didn't hesitate to tell her, at the same time inviting her to physically join me in the observatory. Fortunately, there was plenty to see there, without my new ship. Apparently, the League decided to bite the bullet and take Sinclair for a ride. In general, they had been conducting an extremely intense information exchange in the last few days, which allowed me to learn more about that conflict with the Dilgars and the internal political alignments within their little group than in all the previous time on the station. Not that I was particularly interested, but still. And now, we were visited by warships of all members of the League of Non-Aligned Worlds, which gave us a rare opportunity, so to speak, to feel like we were at an exhibition. In general, it was very interesting to compare the ideas about style and beauty of different biological species in real life. Are you looking forward to the coming massacre? Lillidan greeted me in a dispassionate tone as she approached. I'm admiring the view, I smiled back, turning to the Neka. Enjoying the last minutes before the bloodshed. Your moral character is terrible. A bit over the top with the subject drama, I note, turning my gaze to the ships. I'll take that into account. The girl nodded slightly, accepting the remark on the topic of her behavioral model. Would you like to try Momo, or the little sister archetype? Don't even think about it. This time I was really worried. I had no doubt that she was capable of modeling any style of behavior, but I didn't want to see it. Are you afraid to try new things? I'm conservative, I smile, catching her eye. By the way, what do you think about Jadur? I've already studied all the data obtained from the information carriers of the plundered Minbari colony, but it was interesting to learn the personal opinion of another fully intelligent and personality-possessing replicator. Even if, with a high degree of probability, I can calculate this opinion myself. Inflated self-importance, cruelty, racism, obsessive thirst for revenge, critical thinking in a partially depressed state. A typical despot of the barbarian era, aiming at the rise and victory of his people, regardless of the cost, Korone listed dispassionately, slightly moving her ears in a gesture of disdain. Yes, for the movement of the ears, she developed a complete system of transmitting emotions, similar to facial expressions. You won't object, I chuckled, but the serum confuses me. Do you think it could really do something so high-tech? It is not impossible. By all accounts, despite her bouquet of mental deviations, she was a genius. And in general, madness often goes hand in hand with genius. I continued the thought, receiving an agreeing movement of the ears in response. And one of the local ancients could have helped her. I'm stating the obvious. They specialize in organic technologies. As you know, the Steel Blade's archives did not contain detailed information on her research. I suppose they did not trust themselves, but that means we can only guess. But still, the Minbari hid her for several years. Probably, Lillidan nodded, turning one of her ears. Moreover, based on the behavior of the Narn and Centauri ambassadors, with a probability of 57.7654%, we can say that they are also aware of the discovery of the Deathbringer. Yes, that's interesting. I stroked my beard with a smile. And Sinclair most likely knows about the serum too. But he didn't convey this information to you. Doubly curious. Taking a last look at the ships hanging at the station, still hesitating to make any sudden movements, I nod to my thoughts and head towards the elevator. Interlude. Garibaldi was nervous, and there were objective reasons for that. The noisy appearance on the station of a woman branded, in at least a dozen worlds, as the greatest maniac of the galaxy was in itself an excellent reason. And the interesting fact that she arrived on a Minbari ship from their sector and in their military uniform. And this, with the ostentatious humanism of the Combheads. Even if we forget about some strange dances with her by the Earth government, the whole sector reeked of rot from this whole situation. And the paranoid instinct did not give the man any peace. And Michael, although he complained about his instinct, could not help but listen to it. If only because he was still alive and relatively healthy, with his work and lifestyle. The worst premonitions found justification almost immediately. Before they even had time to really understand who was on board, G'Kar already insistently asked for a private meeting with the prisoner. To apologize for the behavior of the assistant? Yeah, right. To wait for such a thing from the Nons, and voluntarily at that? The proverbial crayfish will whistle on the mountain, and Londo will become a monk, then this will happen. From the very first words of the Non ambassador, who appeared in the cell, he realized that he was not mistaken. This scum clearly had something to offer, something very important, which all interested parties would definitely want. And one could forget about morality and ethics in such matters. Garibaldi knew very well how it was done, at the top. But it seemed that Jadur was also a thing. Nartoth's attack pissed her off, and she openly demanded the ambassador's assistant's head as payment for the information. To G'Kar's credit, he sent her on an erotic walk without slamming the door on the way out, only because on the Babylon the doors didn't allow that in principle. But that was only the beginning. The League ambassadors were alarmed, having somehow gotten wind of the presence of the Deathbringer by Murphy's Law. Garibaldi had long been convinced that half the station's inhabitants were fucking clairvoyants, no matter what the telepaths from the Psi Corps claimed. Or maybe his department was leaking like crazy, which was even worse for his pride. In any case, a real bedlam and hysteria began, threatening Babylon with an international military invasion. But, as if that wasn't enough, right before the key council meeting, Ambassador Baal's assistant showed up at the station. Incidentally, he was even more stoned than his boss, because only a complete idiot could have gone out to a peaceful station on a 4-kilometer-long fool, the sight of which would have made half the captains of the Earth fleet relieve themselves right at their combat posts. Or a narcissistic bastard who loved to shock the public, just like Baal himself. It seemed like there was nowhere else to go. No, friend Michael. Take this and sign for it. A military squadron of ships from all the states of the League of Non-Aligned Worlds right under the portholes, wouldn't you like it? And here's another cherry on the cake. Pharaoh, as he was dubbed by those who had heard at least something about the interior of the ambassador of this damn empire, deigned to show curiosity after the meeting and personally look at the hero of the occasion, and try to refuse him when his monstrous monster is still at the station. I had to drop everything and run to organize access, along with video surveillance of the meeting. The latter could not be trusted to anyone outside. Two piquant details were always trying to surface during every conversation with this psychopath. Before he could give all the necessary orders, Baal was practically standing at the door of the cell, smiling slightly with his benevolent smile as usual, and all of Garibaldi's instincts told him that this guy would destroy his enemies with exactly the same smile, and he would probably destroy planets just as casually as he had dealt with the cruisers of the Drazi who had attacked him. It was scary to even imagine what could happen after their conversation, and if Baal also demanded that she be handed over to his empire, oh, another boy. I suppose you've come for my creation too. Jadur greeted the guest with a sly smile. Still with his eye twitching nervously, Garibaldi promised himself that if the ambassador simply strangled her now, he would definitely pretend that he turned away for a moment and did not see anything. Speak up, don't be shy. I see that politeness is not your strong point, is it? The Lord stroked his beard with a habitual gesture, looking at his interlocutor with some curiosity. If you want gentle treatment, I think there is a place here where you can rent a girl for the night. So let her caress you. And I have no time to engage in empty chatter with God knows who, the Dilgar snapped. That's reasonable, the ambassador agreed, still grinning. My name is Baal. I have the honor of being the Supreme Lord of the Goa Old Empire, and to clear up any misunderstandings, members of my species are fundamentally incapable of dying of old age. Got it, bitch. Did you think that by being so important to all interested parties you could ensure yourself freedom of action? Ha! As they say, for every tricky nut, there is a bolt with a left-hand thread. Then why are you here, if my serum is of no use to you? Oops. How quickly she became wary and polite. Yes and no. I came to ask if your drug would be suitable for my collection of such things. Baal sat down on a chair opposite the Deathbringer. I'll ask you straight. With prolonged use, it should turn the users into Dilgar? Garibaldi frantically checked whether the video was recording on the data crystal. He had never seen such bulging eyes and a dropped jaw, although he was sure that if there had been a mirror in front of him, he himself would not have gone far from the prisoner's surprise. Judging by the reaction, the answer is no. Sad. The Goa'uld leaned back thoughtfully. I was counting on something interesting, like a serious combination with the goal of reviving my own race as the ruling elite of several civilizations at once. And here it's just a primitive longevity serum. It's even kind of petty. Am I right? Jadur's face didn't change expression. Obviously she hadn't yet recovered from the shock, but she clearly tried to wheeze something in response. Right, stated the ambassador. And apparently, its synthesis requires special conditions and ingredients. What is it? Baal was practically not paying attention to his interlocutor, talking as if to himself. Although, as it seemed to Michael, he was still closely watching the woman's reaction, making his own conclusions based on it. Complex technology? No. Oh, maybe of living origin? Other representatives of a specific race are required as material. Guessed right? Baal raised his eyebrows. Tch, how primitive. Nothing new or original. You should take an interest in the Earth's chronicles or something. Legends about vampires, for example. I wouldn't be surprised if on Earth, you can still find 5 similar technologies in storerooms from the pre-industrial era. The man stood up. Well, apparently, communication with the Minbari warrior caste dulls one. They themselves do not know how to weave intrigues and spoil others. Kindergarten. In that case, allow me to take my leave. You are completely useless. Why did you put on this show? Korone greeted me as soon as I left the security service area. Interest, I smiled, catching up with the girl and leading her further down the corridor. Her reaction? Korone's cat ears drooped in a gesture of interest. More likely Sinclair and his command? The cabin was crammed with surveillance equipment, so he would see our entire conversation with Jadur in less than half an hour, if I understood anything about Mr. Garibaldi's character. I still don't understand the logic. Even with your defective personality, it's too pointless, Lillidan said uncompromisingly. How strict you are. It's your fault. Yes, I remember. It's all my fault. I smile. The green-eyed android nodded importantly. In fact, I had prescribed this behavior for her myself. Like, you have to troll your boss everywhere. Troll him always. Troll him in everything. Yes, so he doesn't relax. But at the same time, her words had a really important function. She had to evaluate my actions from the point of view of bare logic, rationality, and the benefit-cost situation. As is known, at royal courts there was a special position called jester, whose main task was to tell the monarch the truth, no matter how unpleasant it was. Well, and also to spy a little on the gang flocking to the throne and report. But this is not our case. Thus, I decided to use the experience of ancestors and create an assistant for myself who would be able to point out the shortcomings of my ideas, and if necessary, pull me up. So there could be no claims for constant jibes on the topic of my defectiveness and illogicality. After all, from the point of view of a full-fledged replicator, even just playing the role of ambassador to Babylon, I really do act in a highly irrational way. However, my actions make sense. You do understand that there is a 97.3617% chance that she will be eliminated before she can transfer the technology to anyone? This is the most probable development of events? The girl agreed. The animal instincts of organic life forms do not allow for the rise of trusting and accommodating individuals in the political hierarchy. Consequently, none of the interested parties will allow competitors to have a chance to take sole possession of such technology. That's right. That's why. Lord Baal! Garibaldi's shout interrupted me. The man himself did not keep us waiting and very quickly caught up with our couple. Mr. Garibaldi? I stop, answering the man with a polite smile. Commander Sinclair asked me to convey that the next meeting of the Advisory Council is about to take place. It looks like they finally came to a compromise regarding Jadur. Oh, thank you. I nod. I'll head to the conference room immediately. By the way, let me introduce Korone, my assistant. The man opened his mouth to say something, but casting an attentive glance at my companion, he hesitated a little. Yes, very glad. Korone only shook her head slightly at this. Rude. Will you join us? I interrupt the pause that has just begun. Garibaldi tore his gaze away from the green fur on the cat's ears with difficulty. No. Please excuse me. I still have urgent matters to attend to. I understand. I bow my head slightly. Well, good luck to you, Mr. Garibaldi, in your difficult work. Watching the security chief walk away from us, I turned to Korone again. So, back to the topic. Who do you think will kill her? I would guess the Narns. In second place, the Abbé, the girl answered reservedly. Yes, I thought. It was logical. Both of them should feel the most insulted. But if you remember one feature of this galaxy, everything is not so clear-cut. How about a small bet? A passion for gambling is a recognized mental disorder even among organic life forms. Lillidan flapped her ears, maintaining an absolutely impassive expression on her face. And your answer? When I got to the council chamber, all the ambassadors were already there. Well, except Kosh, of course. He, as usual, treated all the local fuss with a certain indifference. The League ambassadors were quietly talking among themselves, and Sinclair stood a little to the side, staring at the screen, which showed the currently inactive transition zone. The picture was obviously transmitted from one of the observation probes scurrying around the Babylon. By the way, the League ships had already received the all-clear and safely left the space around the station, which spoke well in favor of the diplomatic talents of the Earth representative. Congratulations, Commander. The man shuddered slightly at my remark, turning towards the voice. It looks like you were able to find a solution to the problem. Ahem. Yes, Lord Baal, the officer nodded. The ambassadors and I managed to reach a compromise. I hope you won't take it as an insult that you weren't invited to these negotiations. You refused to participate in the vote, and they were held behind the scenes. Not at all, I smile. As I already said, we prefer not to interfere in events that we don't understand. Korone, standing behind my right shoulder, nodded in confirmation, duplicating the gesture with a corresponding movement of her ears. I'm glad to hear it, and the eyes twitched in the direction of the green hair. They twitched. Heh, heh. At that moment, a broadly smiling Londo Mollery entered the meeting room, gesturing, explaining something to Lenier, who was noticeably displeased with such an interlocutor. They were followed by a worried Garibaldi. The commander nodded his apology to us and quickly walked over to his security chief. Not a minute had passed before they had moved slightly to the side and were discussing their readiness for some action. Of course, they tried to speak quietly, but with the replicator's capabilities, I could easily hear every word. The same could be said for the League ambassadors. Apparently, it was decided to send Jadur for experiments, in the literal sense. And one really can't help but admire Sinclair's talents. He somehow managed to push through the decision that the research would be conducted on Earth. Of course, with the participation of all interested parties, but on Earth. What a talent, not a man. So, together with Korone, having fun with impudent eavesdropping, I almost missed, okay, I'm lying, the moment when the conversation of the Babylon officers turned to my attaché. Or rather, Garibaldi, with his characteristic interest in women and everything unusual, asked the chief who she was and where she came from. As far as I understand, Jeffrey's quiet voice reached me, she is his assistant, but also an observer for their state, and a bodyguard in case of unforeseen situations. Body. Cough. Bodyguard? She? The head of security, barely suppressing a cry and almost holding back the stunned expression on his face, looked with wide eyes at the back of the fragile girl, who could be taken more for a schoolgirl. Listen, if you want, you can ask Baal yourself, Sinclair whispered, also glancing in our direction. But I'm afraid... You know, Garibaldi hesitated nervously. I think I'll refrain too. Okay, the commander sighed. I think it's time to begin. Uh-huh, I'm nearby, Michael responded and took a couple of steps to the side. Well, I suppose we can begin, Sinclair announced to everyone walking out to the center of the room. The League ambassadors fell silent and began to gather around him. After looking around at those present once more and making sure that all interested parties were gathered, the man gave the order through the communicator. The screen showed a Minbari passenger shuttle slowly emerging from the station's hangar and heading towards the transition zone. Ambassador Koch? Garibaldi's surprised voice broke the solemn silence. A second later, everyone noticed how the Vorlon ambassador's spacesuit hangar slowly floated into the hall. To complete the picture, I additionally admired what was happening through the younger ones connected to the station's systems and the planet below, as well as Korone's ship, so I immediately noticed the arrival of a new character. Apparently, Ambassador Koch was not as indifferent to what was happening as he wanted to appear to everyone present. I'm even inclined to think that long ago, as soon as Jadur appeared on the Babylon, he found out everything about the composition and properties of the drug she brought to the station. Fortunately, for a telepath of his level, this should not be difficult. After which, apparently, he made his own decision on what to do with it and its creator. Otherwise, how could one explain the fact that a heavy Vorlon cruiser majestically sailed out of the transition zone, preventing the Minbari shuttle from entering it? Damn it! Ivanova! What? Sinclair had just started speaking into the communicator when a bright green discharge flashed between the four appendages of the Vorlon ship, and a thin, shimmering beam of energy struck the Deathbringer's transport. Telemetry data from my ship's scanners poured into my consciousness in a wide stream. The physical principle resembled the beam weapons of the Minbari and other local species, but the execution was fundamentally different. It was not even the organic hull and systems of the Vorlon ship, the beam construction configuration itself. The architecture of energy manipulation differed from the level of the locals, like alloy steel differs from the Bronze Age crafts. As many as 5% of all the juniors' computing power was immediately directed by me to develop an analog, based on the data obtained. And at the same time, I watched the expressions on the delegation's faces with a slight smile. Not yet understanding what had happened, exchanging glances with each other. They were quite funny. An excited hum of voices began to grow in the hall. "Why?" Sinclair asked, looking gloomily at Kosh as he entered. "You are not ready for immortality," the Vorlon answered the man, slightly tilting his spacesuit helmet and, as usual, holding a mysterious pause. "You lost your bet," I said, quite contentedly, stating the obvious to Korone, deliberately not lowering my voice. "The Narns would be more logical," the android answered with barely noticeable annoyance in her voice. Just like me, not using the goad language and not paying any visible attention to the stunned looks of those around her. "Lord Baal," Sinclair called to me questioningly. "Oh, don't be offended, Commander." I removed the laughing notes from my voice. "It may be unpleasant, but my secretive friend is absolutely right. Immortality is a gift that very easily turns into a curse. Believe me, none of you would like to live in a society ruled by eternal politicians born in the era of the power of money and intrigue." "Oh, interesting." The units in the Korone ship registered that the Vorlon cruiser attempted to scan the ship. I looked at Kosh. He was also looking at me. The aperture of his eye almost completely narrowed. This was getting interesting. Would he do anything else? The seconds ticked by, counting down millionths. I saw 1,000 possibilities and felt how Korone had already taken control of every ready replicator ship in the galaxy, preparing for any of them. But no. Without saying anything, the Vorlon ambassador turned and left the room. At the same moment, the effect on the ship disappeared, and the cruiser, slowly turning around, just as majestically headed towards the transition zone, leaving the station system. Well, I've already attracted the Vorlon's interest. Let's wait and see what this will lead to. Will Kosh really come for a private conversation? The appearance of the Vorlon cruiser and the behavior of Ambassador Kosh at the meeting caused a loud and indignant discussion among all the League ambassadors, which, however, was not at all surprising. Such a treasure was stolen from under their noses, and at the moment when they practically held it in their hands. But the Vorlon Empire was not the kind of neighbor towards whom one could allow oneself to make particularly abrupt gestures. I suppose that even Earth, with its maniacs in the government and a bunch of conspirators in the best traditions of secret societies, would not have risked making any claims regarding what had happened. The cruiser that had flown to the station eloquently showed everyone the real state of affairs. Sinclair's face showed how worried the man was about what was happening. It seemed that Jeffrey had already managed to get hooked on treason by watching the staring contest that Kosh and I had arranged, and he was well aware of the consequences that could result if our ship started sorting things out in such close proximity to the Babylon. I wonder if the keeper of the Great Machine would do anything if the Vorlon cruiser started rioting. I think it's time to send our ship away. It's certainly pleasing to the eye, but one shouldn't completely forget about tact. Returning to the embassy apartments, I settled comfortably on one of the sofas. Korone sat down primly opposite, carefully folding her hands on her knees. "You could have done it right away, but you chose to mock the nervous system of the local inhabitants. This is being told to me by the one who designed a 4-kilometer ship just to add some pathos to her appearance," I retorted with a grin. "My task was to support the formation of the correct image of the Empire." Without blinking an eye, Lillidan mirrored. "I carried out your order, and you are simply asserting yourself, which is a very alarming sign." "Touché," I smiled. At that moment, the embassy communications computer terminal gave off an incoming call signal. Reflexively tracking the source, I accepted it with some surprise. "Lord Baal?" The slightly frowning face of Ambassador Delenn appeared on the screen. However, she quickly returned, and even slipped by, unnoticed, in all this fuss. "I apologize for disturbing you, but could you spare me some time for a conversation?" "Of course, Madam Ambassador," I nod with a smile. "Where will you be comfortable?" "If you don't mind, I'll be with you in half an hour." After waiting for my assenting bow, Delenn immediately hung up. I smile and stroke my beard thoughtfully. It will be interesting to hear what exactly the Minbari ambassador has to say. I think Lanier has already informed her of what has been happening on and around the station while she was away, and that is probably what has caused her such concern. However, we will wait until he arrives and find out everything. I suppose this is the Minbari's reaction to our little performance on their colony. "Now you'll have to kill her," Korone said, twitching one ear slightly. "I warned you not to leave witnesses. With your inclinations, it's the only way to avoid prosecution. Thanks for support. It was a condemnation, the green-eyed girl objected. I know. Proving to be quite punctual, Delenn was indeed standing at my door in 29 minutes, 54 seconds, which for a mere mortal was already an achievement. Entering the cabin and bowing in greeting, the woman with a silent question in her eyes and surprise on her face turned her gaze from me to Korone. Good evening, Madame Ambassador. I stand up to greet the guest, bowing in response with a smile. Allow me to introduce you to Korone, my attaché. Nice to meet you. The girl nodded a little dryly, also rising to her feet. Likewise. Delenn's gaze moved in bewilderment from my assistant's hair to her ears, which twitched slightly in irritation under my gaze. Nevertheless, the ambassador quickly got over her surprise and, with a mixture of guilt and embarrassment on her face, smoothly sank into the chair I offered her. So, I'm listening to you. I smiled good-naturedly. What did you want to discuss? I apologize for the unexpected intrusion, the Minbari began hesitantly. But our government has authorized me to discuss with you an incident that took place on one of our colonies. I'm all ears, Madam Ambassador. I nod, already habitually stroking my chin with my finger. Korone didn't sit down again, preferring to stand to the side behind me. It is a small, moderately distant world from the metropolis, Shelekta, belonging mainly to the warrior caste. Of course, there is a civilian population there, but the administrative power belongs to the military. Delenn, with an absent-minded look, looked around the room, but I was ready to bet that, despite this, she was closely and tenaciously watching my face in reaction to her words. A few days ago, the planet was attacked by creatures unknown to us, or rather, I suppose, mechanisms. Yes, I was informed about this. I nod. Moreover, I believe that I should apologize to you for this incident. Excuse me? Delenn raised her eyebrows in surprise. You see, there was an unfortunate misunderstanding. I smile and shake my head. One of our reconnaissance probes ended up on your planet. This, I move my fingers, as if choosing a word, is an outdated device. We haven't used them for several millennia. It was assumed that all the devices sent received a signal to return. But in your case, there was a program failure. A probe? The Minbari asked incredulously. But it actually destroyed our colony. The ambassador's voice was filled with genuine indignation. That's exactly what I apologize for. The investigation revealed that a software error partially initiated the resource development protocol. The system recognized your structures as rich mineral deposits and began to develop them. The reason is the industrial processing and purification of materials that had already taken place. As soon as the products of industrial activity were exhausted, the program would have moved on to developing less accessible and rich deposits. That is, the bowels of the planet. Fortunately, up to that point, your ships were able to inflict enough damage on the swarm for the system to stop perceiving them as hostile environmental phenomena and activate the safety protocol. Or, to be more precise, fortunately, this protocol provides for sending a preliminary request home, and this section of the program worked without errors. To tell the truth, we did not expect that some of these scouts were still operational, but we managed to track the signal and block the protocol for countering aggression. What happened next, you yourself should know. Delenn sat for a moment, considering what she had just heard. It seemed that this explanation had not occurred to the Minbari, and now she was trying to decide for herself whether to believe my words or not. In any case, there was a good chance that members of the warrior caste themselves would follow the ambassador in asking questions. They were certainly not as hot-tempered and reckless as the Dradzi, but the blow they had received would have done great damage to their pride. I imagined the Grey Council would forbid them from taking aggressive action or getting into trouble, but we all know what rules are for, even in a society as hierarchical and cohesive as the Minbari. This is extremely important information, Lord Baal, the Minbari woman said slowly, and in light of it, the events that took place look completely different than they might seem at first glance. I have always been of the opinion that timely information can preserve peace and sanity much more effectively than all the agreements and assurances. Thank you for the clarifications you provided. Delenn stood up and bowed briefly to me and her assistant. I must convey them to our government immediately. No need for thanks, Ambassador. I stand up to greet him with a smile. If you have any additional questions, I will be happy to dispel your curiosity, if only it is in my power. Please, I wave my hand towards the door. I will show you the way. The woman bowed slightly again and slowly, still deep in thought, walked towards the exit into the corridor. By the way, could you dispel my personal curiosity? The Minbari woman slowed down slightly. If it is within my power, when your ships arrived at Shalakta, the warrior caste ships received a warning message, but tell me, why did it only come in text form? After all, you clearly have a video link. Is this some kind of tradition? Or, oh, that, I smile broadly, shaking my head. Don't worry about it. She was my assistant, she's still quite young, and she has, a peculiar attitude towards all young species. Well, childish maximalism, all that. What do you mean? The ambassador asked, puzzled. Well, she considers everyone who hasn't reached at least 100,000 years of history to be stupid and primitive savages. Hence the text in simple sentences, so that you understand exactly. Don't worry about it. Casting a thoughtful glance at Korone, who was still standing in her previous place, Delenn nodded slightly abruptly and turning, quickly walked towards the elevator. You are an unprincipled demagogue, the girl said laconically when the door closed. I know. I smiled broadly at my assistant. When talking to people, always smile. Thought of the day, Astarte Dest. Interlude. Mr. Bester, come in. Director, a dark-haired, middle-aged man dressed in the black uniform of the Psi Corps, entered the office with a short bow, practically a simple nod of the head. On the left lapel of his jacket, a metal badge with the Latin letter CSI gleamed dully, and the hands of the man who entered were covered in black leather gloves. In a word, he was a typical representative of telepaths in the service of the state, or psychops, as they were nicknamed behind their backs by the people. Walking to the guest chair opposite the director's desk, Bester frowned for a second, looking around in confusion. But the expectantly raised eyebrow of the head of the Psi Corps forced him to twitch his cheek in annoyance, and nevertheless sit down in the offered place. So, Mr. Bester, do you know why I called you? No, Director. The man went over all the recent events in his mind, but frankly speaking, he could not remember anything serious enough to require the personal attention of the head of the Psi Corps. We are going to talk about events that happened some time ago on Babylon 5. I suppose you are not aware of it, it was not advertised, but since your participation is required here, it is worth clarifying a few points. The owner of the office was silent, leaning back in his chair. I assume you're talking about the diplomatic scandal that almost broke out around the Deathbringer? Oh, you already know? Well, that makes it easier. But before I voice your task, I would like to hear your opinion about the new ambassador who has appeared on Babylon. But, Bester frowned in confusion, I already filed an official report upon returning from the station, right after the story with Ironheart. Of course, I read it very carefully, but time has passed, and you probably have additional thoughts on this issue? As I already wrote in my report, the telepath frowned, still not quite understanding the essence of this call and these questions, but nevertheless collected his thoughts and began to answer. In the story of Mr. Ironheart's escape, there were many details that clearly indicated the participation of telepaths dissatisfied with the policy of the Psi Corps. It was too easy for him to escape from us and get to Babylon 5. Moreover, after some reflection, I came to the conclusion that the station's command may also be involved in the events that took place. But all this would have been impossible to pull off without the support of someone extremely influential. And you think that this someone could be the new ambassador, who, by the way, appeared at the station? Ahem. Lord Baal. Bester darkened, recalling his impressions of the alien. His persona raises far more questions than it answers. I didn't attach any importance to it then, but during our meeting in the station corridor, the telepath frowned. I couldn't read anything in his thoughts. Of course, I didn't attempt a deep scan, after all, he was an ambassador. But I didn't catch even the usual background thoughts from him, not even fragments of them. You know that a telepath of level P10 and higher is capable of feeling someone else's consciousness, even if the person, Intelligent is unconscious. But here there was absolutely nothing, not the slightest presence of reason. I felt Mr. Garibaldi perfectly well, the surrounding inhabitants of the station too. But in the place of the Goa old ambassador, I saw nothing. As if he wasn't there at all. I see. The director thoughtfully drummed his fingers on the table. It's good that you reported this. Do you have any guesses about the reasons? Only one. The telepath shook his head. He somehow closed himself off from telepathic scanning. But to do it so completely from P-12, either we encountered something completely unknown, or the ambassador is an incredibly powerful telepath, much stronger than anyone we have ever met. This is alarming news. However, Mr. Bester, we will deal with the question of the rebel telepaths and their possible ally a little later. The following will be required of you. The man leaned forward, looking intently at his interlocutor. There are many unclear details in the situation with the Deathbringer, and from all sides, no matter how you look at it, the Vorlons and Lord Baal are involved. And if we cannot afford to openly interfere with the Vorlons, then in the case of... Forgive me for interrupting, Director, but I wouldn't recommend approaching Baal either. You saw the footage that slipped into the news about how his ship destroyed the Drazi cruisers? Right now he's in a friendly, if not aggressive mood. But we need to be extremely careful in choosing our methods of obtaining information. Well, I'll think about it. In any case, the serum the Jadur was going to provide would have been an extremely valuable acquisition for humanity. And since its creator and the substance itself were destroyed, we must find out all the information available beyond that. So, as soon as you're ready, head to the Babylon. Officially, as an extraordinary inspection of Thalia Winters. In reality, you must find out everything you can about Lord Baal and his race, as well as his involvement in what is happening. I understand. In that case, you are free to go. So, you'll cut it? Well, in surgery, you can't do without it, Franklin answered with some bewilderment, exchanging glances with his assistant. But you have absolutely nothing to worry about. Let's go, Sean. The alien who asked the question reflected almost disgust on his face, and taking his wife by the arm, he dragged her toward the exit. They won't help us here. Thank you, Doctor. The woman stood up. Sorry that we took up your time. But, wait. The doctor caught up with the departing parents right at the door. This is an absolutely safe operation. The boy will be completely healthy. It's you who don't understand, Doctor. The mother turned angrily to him. You can cut animals. They don't have a soul. But it's unacceptable to do this to a race chosen by God. The airway obstruction won't go away on its own. The doctor's assistant interrupted the conversation. If the boy doesn't have surgery, he'll die. I won't allow... You don't understand, the child's father interrupted Franklin. The boy can't be cut. Now I know what is destined for him. But, look, it's very easy to remove the blockage, and the fluid circulation system will immediately resume its functions. After that, filling his air bladder will be a piece of cake. He'll have to lie down for a couple of days, but he's young and strong. He'll be back on his feet in no time. It's a very simple operation. Its essence is clear to us, and that is why we are against. Our veterinarians perform such operations on animals. Would you prefer that he die in agony? What god do you worship? We have nothing to talk about. We belong to different nations. We have different destinies. With a grim look, the alien bowed briefly to Franklin, and dragging her husband along with her, quickly left the medical unit. As a religious representative of her people, she had no choice but to accept the trial that had befallen their family. And only one part of her, responsible for motherhood and love for her child, did not allow the woman to give up yet. Many species lived on the station. Perhaps one of them had a way to heal her son without depriving him of his soul. How's the boy? Garibaldi, helping Sinclair sort through a pile of paperwork with requests for import of goods, looked at Franklin, who was sitting there. Any progress? He will die, the doctor answered gloomily. The parents are against the operation. What should I do? You know that the Babylon 5 leadership is not all-powerful. Dr. Franklin, Sinclair sighed heavily, we have no right to interfere with their religious beliefs. But you can order me to save the child's life, and I will take action. The man shrugged. By doing so, I will create a precedent. But you already created it, when you ordered to save the life of Ambassador Koch. Yes, Franklin nodded at the officer's raised eyebrows in surprise. I know about this incident. He's right, Jeff. Then you made it clear that the life of any intelligent being is much more important than any dogma. On the other hand, Garibaldi winced. There is a principle of non-interference in the affairs of alien races. We must remain neutral. What if I file a report? The dissatisfied doctor leaned forward. I won't accept it. Don't you care about the boy's death? It does. Otherwise we wouldn't be talking at all. Damn it, Franklin. My hands are tied. I stand by my opinion, no matter what. The chief physician of Babylon 5 stood up abruptly, and without saying goodbye, left the commander's office. Your treatment is not helping. The boy is getting weaker. If we had taken him, he would already be on Taylorton. He wouldn't have survived such a journey. Franklin shook his head, looking away from the screen that displayed the child's room. We trusted you, and that's why our son will die. No. He will die because you don't trust me. You brought the boy here for me to save him, so let me do it. Please. He needs this operation. Otherwise he will choke on his own phlegm. There are more important things in life than a breath of air, Doctor, the boy's father answered firmly. Without his soul, he will not be able to live on. He's your son, damn it. Do it for yourself. No, do it for him. Stop fooling yourself. Okay. Seeing that his words were having no effect, Franklin stood up resolutely in front of the parents. At our station, the patient's life is valued above all else. I will be forced to ask Commander Sinclair to temporarily deprive you of parental rights. What does this mean? The woman asked warily. I will do everything in my power to save the child. Even if you are against it, I will perform the operation. No, you wouldn't dare. Please, Doctor. No. Sorry, but I have to act in Sean's best interests. Sinclair rubbed his eyes tiredly, trying with all his might not to raise his gaze to the visitors. The commander had already been pretty tired of this whole story with the sick boy, his stubborn parents, and Franklin, who had been knocking on his door almost every hour, begging for permission from his superiors to carry out treatment despite his parents' prohibition. And now, these same parents had gotten to him personally. It's a pity your ambassador isn't here. He would know what to do and would give you advice. He would say the same thing, Commander. Don't let the doctor perform the operation. I will have to protect your interests. This means that I must, taking into account your interests, also take care of the child. You have no right, the boy's father objected. Unfortunately, I do. Dr. Franklin has filed an official report, and I will have to make a decision. Thank you for stating your position. Sinclair rose from the table. The decision will be made within 24 hours. Are you against us too? You'll give the child to the doctor? Earthlings are always for each other. It's a pity that you think so. You'd better feel sorry for the doctor. If he starts cutting up the boy, the man said darkly, looking intently at Sinclair. If he touches Sean, I'll kill him. Eh? Lord Baal? Well, admit it. I'm right. Londo, in an extremely excited and inspired state, clapped me on the shoulder, pointing with his other hand at the stage. Yes, I can't help but agree. Ambassador Mollery, it is truly an aesthetically pleasing sight. Huh? Gakar? And you? The Centauri, still smiling broadly, turned to the Narn ambassador who was sitting on the opposite side of the table and began to convince him of something. And on the stage at that time, a really rather aesthetically pleasing dance of a young Centauri girl continued, only slightly short of the striptease that is usual on Earth. Although there were no noticeable dissatisfied people in the audience, and I, although I was not able to fully experience the whole complex of experiences, could not help but admit that the spectacle was pleasing to the eye despite all the differences in the physiology of our species. Centauri women fully met the criteria of human beauty. But now, I have a genetic lab. This, of course, would be an absolutely senseless waste of resources, but why not bring something new into this universe? For example, the same Twi'leks, or rather, their female half. It's just a pity that I don't have data on their physiology and anatomy. I would have to assemble a biological species from a picture. No. Perhaps now this really would be too wasteful of computing power, but you can think about the idea. I think the local public would appreciate it. Ahem. What am I thinking about? Lord Baal, the Centauri ambassador addressed me, noisily sipping something alcoholic from another cup. Women are the main miracle in the universe. They come into our lives hand in hand with problems and difficulties, but without them. Londo sighed dreamily. Without them, we can't go anywhere. I've already said this once. Gakar sighed quietly. But this is one of the few questions where I'm inclined to agree with my colleague's statement without hesitation. And you are not alone, my friend. I smile, raising my glass. Let's drink to the beautiful. Holy words, Londo supported enthusiastically. Gakar also readily added his glass to the general salute. Tell me, Lord Baal. Londo turned to me again. What are they like? They? Women. What are they like in your... He moved his fingers, searching for the word. Galaxy. No. Empire. Oh, I'm smiling. Like everywhere. Ambassador Mollery. Like everywhere. Some are pleasing to the eye and make the heart beat faster. I nod towards the stage where the Centaurian continued to dance, still devoured by the ambassador's gaze. Some are ordinary. Just women. And some are more terrible than a galactic war, especially in anger. Londo winced at the last words. It seemed he was familiar with this concept, and from personal experience. Oh yeah. He was married. And not to one Centauri woman at a time, but to... 3, I think. And, I don't remember exactly, but there were some family squabbles there when you'll get used to it and fall in love didn't happen, and all the political advantages of the Union had already been exhausted. Lord Baal, a familiar displeased voice sounded behind me. I am not at all surprised to find you here. Perhaps you would deign to interrupt your base amusements and attend to your ambassadorial duties. That's what I was saying, gentlemen. I mutter quietly, turning to Korone and smiling. As far as I know, I don't have any business. Your information is out of date. No more than 15 minutes ago, someone made an appointment with you. Can I make an appointment? I feigned genuine surprise. Now you can, Korone said, twitching her ear and turning around, heading towards the exit of the establishment. Ahem. I beg your pardon, gentlemen. I bow to Gakar and Londo. But it seems that state affairs have caught up with me, and I am forced to leave your company. It's okay, Lord Baal, the Centaurian grinned cheerfully. Things always come at the most inopportune moment. Believe me from experience. Nodding to the man who remained in the company of his evil friend to enjoy, as Korone said, base entertainment, I head towards the exit into the corridor. As expected, the Neka stood imperturbably outside, leaning her back against the door. And as soon as I appeared in the passage, she moved towards the elevator. What and who needs from me? If you had behaved in a more rational manner, you would have known that a family of aliens had come to visit you. They have no representative on the station, so they are trying to find support among other races. They did not disclose the purpose of their visit. I assume they wish to discuss it with you personally. Curious. Well, I'm getting a little bored with Londo's company anyway, so if they've left their coordinates, let them know I'm ready to receive them. I'll let you know. The girl twitched her ears slightly. Although I still consider your behavior completely irrational. You should reconsider your priorities. You already said that. I waved Korone off, exiting the elevator and heading towards my door. Lord Baal! We are incredibly grateful to you for agreeing to receive us and listen to our request. I'm listening to you attentively. I nod with a smile. And if it's in my power, I'll help you with your difficulty. The man looked at his wife, collecting his thoughts. We have a son, Sean. Unfortunately, he became seriously ill. We turned to Dr. Franklin for help, since he is the head of medical services on Babylon 5. But he's not going to treat him, Ambassador, the child's mother chimed in. Our religion places a lot of emphasis on self-improvement and caring for the soul. I don't know if you'll understand us, but I assure you that our empire includes a huge number of civilizations, so different and dissimilar to each other, that if we were not able to somehow resolve differences in the religious and cultural sphere, there would be no talk of any single entity. This gives us a tentative hope, Lord Baal. Because Dr. Franklin has suggested that Sean undergo surgery as a treatment. Surgery, do you understand? He's going to cut him up like an animal. Could you explain in a little more detail what exactly is causing your dissatisfaction? As far as I know, the head of Babylon 5's medical service is an excellent qualified specialist. According to our religion, the boy's father began, but paused, collecting his thoughts. You can slaughter animals. They don't have a soul. It won't harm them in any way. But the people chosen by God, it's unthinkable. Let me clarify. According to your faith, if a doctor operates on your child, then by doing so, he will deprive him of his soul. That's right, the couple nodded uncertainly. An original concept. I had to admit. How did they even go into space with such an attitude? Almost any type of activity is associated with serious risks. I won't even mention the medieval period, with its corresponding stabbing and cutting arsenal of reasoned discussion. But with such an approach, even cutting a salad is scary, not to mention construction, or something more serious. And Dr. Franklin threatened us that he would ask Commander Sinclair to give him permission to operate. My interlocutor continued. He threatened, the woman sobbed, to take away our parental rights so that he could decide Sean's fate alone. Our ambassador is not on the station. There is no one to represent our interests. We have no choice but to seek support from the ambassadors of other nations. Help us. Well, the situation. Although, actually, why not? I suppose it won't be that difficult to cure one child, if even human medicine assumes treatment in the form of a simple operation. At the same time, this will put another small brick in the foundation of the image being built. Ahem. I can already imagine how irrational and defective Korone will call my decision in this case. I thoughtfully stroke my beard. Before giving a final answer, I should visit your son and talk to Dr. Franklin. We will not allow our son to be cut. Did anyone talk about cutting it? I just want to get the most complete picture of what's going on. Ahem. I beg your pardon, Lord Baal. I understand that you've had an extremely busy day. I nod understandingly. Good afternoon, Dr. Franklin. I enter the medical bay with a smile, looking around. Do you have a minute? Ahem. Lord Baal? Franklin raised his eyebrows in surprise. Did something happen to you? No, not at all. I shake my head. At least not in the sense that you put into this word. One family came to me for help. They came to you too? Forgive me. But they came to all the ambassadors in turn. They are ready to do anything just to prevent me from curing their child. They justify it with some stupid religious Dr. Franklin, I raised my hand warningly, stopping the man. I understand that it is your duty to treat intelligent beings. I understand. But it is still worth treating the religious views of other races with more understanding. It is your good fortune that they are not militant fanatics. Otherwise your father would, let's say, tear your head off for one mention of a heretical, from their point of view, action towards his son. The doctor froze for a few seconds. But Lord Baal, the operation is their child's only chance to survive. He has an obstructed airway, and medications can't cure it. In a couple of days, he'll simply choke. And they don't understand that. As far as I can tell, Doctor, they understand everything you've told them perfectly well, and they're perfectly aware that their child could die. It's just that in their minds, death is better than the alternative. But this is barbarism! The man threw up his hands indignantly. How can you put superstitions above the life of your own son? It's a religion. Situations where the principles of faith are more important than any worldly values, including the lives of oneself and loved ones, are quite common, and talking won't do anything here. Reasonable people are rarely inclined to listen and accept someone else's point of view, and those who fervently believe in a certain idea are even more reasonable. As a rule, to change their views, they need personal experience and... How is this earthly expression? Oh yeah, to get their own bumps. But I can't let the boy die, even if it contradicts some of their principles. You still don't understand, Doctor. According to their belief, if you operate on the child, it will lose its soul. which is worse than death. That is, for them, only an empty shell will remain of the child, representing no value. And as I understand it, the child himself will also be absolutely sure of this. With a high degree of probability, this will end simply. I make an indefinite gesture with my hand, with the removal of an unnecessary shell, reminding me of the loss. But there must be a way out. Judging by his face, the Black Doctor took everything very seriously. Certainly. By the way, will you allow me to talk to the boy since I came? Franklin thought for a moment, then nodded, inviting me to follow him. The patient's room turned out to be a small medical box, which contained a bed, a medical terminal, which displayed data on the patient's health, and a simple chair in the corner, for visitors. At the moment, the boy was sleeping, but it was noticeable even to the naked eye. Ahem. I mean, without using the capabilities of the replicators, that he was clearly breathing with difficulty. Stroking my beard, I walk around the bed, looking at the child, and at the same time reading all the information about his condition from the station's computer system. Yes, indeed. Either an operation or the boy will die in 2 days. Well, at least from the point of view of the technological base of people. Dr. Franklin? The voice of the patient's father came from the entrance. It seemed he had decided to play it safe and stay with the boy as long as possible to prevent the medic from performing the operation without their knowledge. Franklin gave me a frowning look and quickly walked towards the visitor. Looking thoughtfully at Sean, I come closer and smoothly lower my palm onto his chest, simultaneously forming in my hand the main components of the Goa'uld's healing hand device. The original, of course, was not as effective as the sarcophagus, but it could handle such a trifle easily and without replicator modifications. Sean jerked at my touch and let out a soft cry, his eyes widening in surprise. I can imagine what it must have looked like from the outside. I put my hand on the boy's chest. He woke up, and the next moment a golden light streamed from my palm. Franklin and his parent rushed to the scream, but immediately froze with a stunned expression on their faces, staring at me. After 4,534 seconds, the scanner showed that the extra tissue in the child's airways had dissolved, the inflammatory process had stopped, and then Franklin's scanner began to blink a green signal, indicating that the patient was completely healthy. Looking in disbelief from me to his father and back, Sean carefully took a deep breath. But how is this possible? Franklin literally grabbed the medical terminal. In the name of the gods, the boy's father exhaled hoarsely. But, Lord Baal, the doctor practically screamed with his soul. Doctor! I look him in the eye, coming closer and putting my arm around the man's shoulder. You understand that you shouldn't talk too much about what happened? I wouldn't like, I emphasized the not with my voice, to have a crowd of pilgrims standing outside my cabin tomorrow morning. I don't like annoying irritants. Can I count on your conscientiousness in this matter? And gently squeeze the shoulder with my fingers. Yes? Oh, of course, Lord Baal. I knew we would understand each other. I smile radiantly, and letting go of Franklin's shoulder, head towards the exit from the medical block, followed by the dumbfounded gaze of the medic. Lord Baal. In the corridor, as soon as I left the medical unit, the boy's father caught up with me. Lord Baal, you cannot imagine the depth of our gratitude. You performed a miracle by healing our child. It didn't take me much effort, I interrupt the man. But I understand. Yes. He nodded his head very, very often. I heard your conversation with the doctor. My wife and I will keep quiet about what happened here. The main thing is that Sean is alive and well, and has kept his soul intact. In that case, good luck to you, your wife, and your son. I give a short bow with a slight smile and, without saying goodbye, turn around, heading towards the elevator and leaving the inspired and, at the same time, puzzled father of the family behind me. Interlude. Good evening, Senator Hidoshi, Sinclair said wearily. I think it's evening here on Earth now. Commander Sinclair, did you want to discuss something important? Yes, Senator. The commander rubbed his eyes, putting the documents he was working on aside. Since I do not de facto have full political power on the station, I would like to consult with you on how to deal with the new ambassador. What exactly are you interested in? His interlocutor immediately came up to him. Lord Baal has been on the station for quite a long time. During this time, let's face it, he has helped resolve a couple of crises, albeit indirectly, but he is not a member of the Babylon 5 Council. That is, in fact, he is an ambassador of a large, powerful empire, but officially he is just a guest of the station. Are you afraid that he might not be satisfied with the current state of affairs? Hidoshi was an experienced politician, and as they say, had a knack for all sorts of diplomatic and bureaucratic hassles, immediately grasping the essence of the Babylon commander's concerns. Not exactly, Senator. It's just... Sinclair paused. Firstly, I wouldn't want to accidentally insult him. And secondly, it seems to me that all this is not so important. Can you explain? An ambassador whose attaché calmly flies to the station on a 4-kilometer ship? Strictly speaking, he will interfere in everything he wants anyway. So, maybe it would be better to solve this problem right away? Before it even appears? It's not as simple as you think, Commander. After some thought, Senator Hidoshi finally exhaled. If you think about it, Babylon 5, as an international station and a neutral zone, is essentially not controlled by any of the governments of the races represented on it. On the other hand, you cannot help but understand that any decision you make as an officer of the Earth's space fleet will be considered by our government and the general staff, especially now, when the war with Minbari is still fresh in memory. I'm sorry. I don't quite understand what you're getting at, Senator. Jeffrey frowned. Bring this issue to a general vote at the council meeting. The senator sighed wearily. Perhaps introducing another alien ambassador, especially such a powerful one, into the station's governing body is not the best idea. But I suppose we don't have much choice. The main thing, Sinclair, do not forget that although the station serves as a guarantor of peace and neutral territory, first and foremost you are an Earth officer. Hidoshi looked piercingly at his interlocutor, with all the responsibilities that entails. So Earth won't object to Lord Balu having a voice on the Babylon 5 Council? If any of the senators are against it, I don't think there will be too many of them. Thank you, Senator. Goodbye, Commander Sinclair. Good evening. Hidoshi disconnected, and the commander sat for a long time, thoughtfully staring at the wall opposite, clearly weighing the pros and cons of introducing the Goa'uld ambassador to the council and pondering the senator's last words regarding the duties of the Babylon commander. Ambassador Kosh, this is Commander Sinclair. May I come in? Jeffrey Sinclair stood in the vestibule outside the Vorlon ambassador's chambers, tensely awaiting an answer. The secretive Vorlon was not the best conversationalist and, as expected, did not receive guests often. Finally, after almost 2 minutes of waiting, a green light lit up above the door, and a small box with oxygen masks opened next to it with a quiet hiss. The Vorlons lived in an atmosphere alien to other races. Having put on the mask, the commander pressed the button near the door to the ambassador's cabin, and, having waited for the atmosphere around him to change, went inside, looking around with interest. This was his first time in Kosh's cabin. The Vorlon ambassador was found in one of the corners of the practically empty, except for some kind of incomprehensible screen, room, standing opposite a screen floating smoothly in the air. With some bewilderment, Sinclair noted that several images were displayed on the screen at the same time, on each of which, however, Baal's ships were easily recognizable. Here is his first arrival at Babylon. The picture is clearly taken from one of the station's duty bots, next to the moment of the Drazi attack. Then golden pyramids, majestically flying away from some planet. Judging by the Minbari cruisers visible in the frame, this is their colony. Well, and fresh footage of the Korone ship drifting near the station. Each picture was accompanied by a chain of symbols incomprehensible to the man, sometimes flashing on the screen, then slowly fading. Ambassador Kosh? In response, the Vorlon's figure only turned slightly towards the guest, and the diaphragm of his eye opened on his spacesuit. I wanted to discuss with you the issue that I am going to put to a vote at the council. Kosh continued to look silently at his interlocutor. It's about Lord Baal. At the sound of the name, the ambassador's eye diaphragm suddenly shrank to almost a point. I plan to raise the question of his official inclusion in the council with the right to vote. You usually do not attend meetings, but in such a matter, I believe it is worthwhile to find out the opinion of all members of the council. Kosh turned slightly towards the screen, still not saying a word. It was completely unclear whether he was considering the man's question or thinking about something of his own, simply ignoring the visitor. He may interfere with the coming events, a voice came from the Vorlon's vocabulator, causing Sinclair to flinch. Coming events? The commander frowned in confusion. But I suppose, with the capabilities of his empire, it won't make much difference whether he's on the council or not. Yes. Sinclair winced as always. Kosh was extremely taciturn and mysterious. In fact, when talking to him, you could never be 100% sure what exactly he meant. Sometimes Jeffrey got the impression that Kosh was simply mocking those around him, deliberately annoying and confusing them with his manner of speech. Ambassador Kosh, will you participate in the vote on the issue of Lord Baal's accession to the council? Sinclair made a second attempt to get an answer to the question he needed. No? No? But he's incomprehensible, the Vorlon said, interrupting Sinclair. Let him participate. The Vorlon will vote yes. Having said this, Kosh turned away, heading behind the screen. The screen with the video recording slowly floated through the air after him. The commander sighed heavily, and turning around, walked out of the cabin into the vestibule,